Good evening, YouTube. It's me, John, the old geek, and it is. Oh, it looks like the timer was a bit slow starting. I don't know if you heard my saying hello there, but I'll say it again. Good evening, YouTube. It's me, John, the old geek, and it's time to stream. We have 6 people watching at the moment. We have Graham lurking in the lobby, but he's muted at the moment, so I don't know if he's anywhere near his computer. A few people have said they're going to join in, and in chat, we already have Shadow and Sun and Major's Musings and Halakar all having said hello. So hello to you chaps. I immediately greet you all, and my viewers dropped to 3 by the looks of things. So looks like people are... Oh, it's the old geek. Can't be bothered watching him. Hello, Slan. Yeah, right, Slan. And hello, Omanal. Should it be a good one? As I said in Discord, I just pulled this topic out of my backside at the last minute last night because I'm going to be running a fighting fantasy, let's all play along type stream very soon. But the 2 books I ordered over the weekend haven't turned up yet. And I'm not particularly confident with the idea of alt-tabbing and switching my screen around because I've only got one monitor. So if I share my screen, I probably can't read chat. So it's one of those things. So I may have to get another computer. Well, we shall see when the finances allow. But I've got to get a car first. That's what I've been doing this afternoon when I should have been working. Looking at cars. Anyhow, Elfbait has arrived. Graham has made himself live on his microphone. Hello, Adam. Hello, Omanal. I could use a giant TV as my monitor, but we've only got one giant TV in the house. It's the one behind me, and it's the one that the wife has plugged into all her cable stuff. And I'm sure she'd get really annoyed if I started rearranging all the wires and tried to squeeze it onto my desk. But we shall see. We shall see. Anyway, I'm going to add a couple of my guests to stream. I don't know exactly who's joining me tonight. DK might. Omanal, you're welcome as always. And anyone else wants to pop in? A good private chat. Oh, private chat. It's just Elfbait saying hello. Hello, Graham. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great.
Adam says another live video that will change the world. Oh wait, it's OSR. Somebody been paying attention to what the nonsense Gary Bay's been putting out. Shadow and Sun, you're more than welcome to join in. Yeah, you're more than welcome to pop in. The link's on my Discord. Discord is the Old Geek. The link to my Old Geek Discord is in my video descriptions. So, Omanal, I'm sure you can coordinate blowing your nose with muting. It's not a problem. It's not a problem. Anyway, let's turn. Elfbait. Elfbait, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's am I coming through okay?
Yeah, absolutely fine.
All right, cool. So no, doing all right. Not a lot of gaming this week. We're doing a planned break from my Monday game, but as I catch up on some game prep. But
well, our Monday game was called off because the host has come down with that lurgy, and he's not feeling too good. So
lovely.
Tested positive on Monday, about 2 hours before we were due to play. So didn't happen this week. And I ran Call of Cthulhu last Thursday. We concluded Forget Me Not, and that was with Major's Musings and some of the other regulars on the channel. And it ended in glorious carnage. They won, and people died, and Major's Musings went mad, and it was marvelous. And then on Saturday, I started off running another group through the same adventure. Only had 2 players. But because it's a amnesia-based adventure, players can join at any point because characters will have been unconscious and will wake up with with no memories. So it's fine for anyone to join whenever they want. So that's going to be running a week on Saturday. The second one of those. First session ran on Saturday afternoon, and then played in DK's game, which he has switched across to OD&D on Saturday night. Right. Yeah, Major's Musings already is a madman, but I was referring to his character. And yeah, you did portray a 20-point sanity loss rather too well. I think there might be some underlying issue there. Did Garibay have a go at me? Oh, I'd like to see that. I would like to see that. Anyway, General Nut, he died. His character died in. Hello, General Nut. How you doing? Oh, and L and Victor Gorchev. Hello. I'm completely bouncing backwards and forwards. I'm talking around in circles, a bit like Garibay does. General Nut played his second character in that Call of Cthulhu game and got to the end. Colstaff's here. Hello. So, yeah, people are piling in. We've now 15 people watching. So maybe I should get onto some form of topic, some sort of sensible topic, instead of just wittering. What was in that tea? Ritalin. Actually, no, I haven't had tea. I decided to have coffee. So, it's got caffeine in. So it's going to set me off.
Coffee is an everyday thing for me.
Well, the reason I went for coffee, I love tea. Tea's my favourite drink, but I don't like a lot of milk in tea. I'm lactose intolerant, so I have to have oat milk or coconut milk, and I only have a tiny spot so it doesn't ruin the taste. And this cup is 1.5 times the size of a normal one, so I would have had 2/3 of a cup. But in coffee, I don't mind. So I've just got coffee, strong coffee with loads and loads of oat milk and a bit of sugar.
It's funny, having until recently having been a Seattleite from up in the Pacific Northwest, where coffee is a big deal. I remember reading an article that was talking about, in a lot of places in the U.S., people have calcium deficiencies, except for in the Pacific Northwest, where everybody's just drinking their lattes and mochas and everything else. Yeah. So they're getting plenty of milk.
Well, I've never drunk a lot of milk. And about 5 or 6 years ago, it turned out that I was actually, it was probably a good thing, because I tried putting it in my diet to think, oh, let's be healthier. And I started exploding at about 11 o'clock every morning, quite literally. And it was the porridge I was having for breakfast that was erupting in a volcanic manner. Oh, well. So much for being, at least trying to be healthy. I won't go into any details, though, of the worst time it happened, when I was stood in the Welsh forests. Anyhow, right, before I scare people off, tonight's discussion, a topic I pulled out of my backside. Hello, Malachi. I haven't said hello to you yet. Is on companies coming out with new versions of games, and whether they are backwards compatible, and whether game evolution is always a good thing. I'm going to make my position in general perfectly clear before we actually start, before I let anyone else in that I fully understand why companies come out with new versions of games, because they have to keep that bottom line ticking over. And after typically after 6 or 7 years, people start tiring of one game and wanting something new in general. I know a lot of us still play first edition or second edition AD&D here because we are old school grognards. But what a new version tends to kickstart sales. That's undeniable. But not every new version has always been successful. And not every new version of a game has been popular with previous fans of a game. And often it's bitten the company in the backside, for example, with Wizards of the Coast and 4th edition D&D, which was an absolute disaster for them. But some revisions of rules are actually quite welcome at times if a company does it properly, if a company does it with compatibility in mind. And I'm going to bring up my favorite game here, Call of Cthulhu. It's been going since 1981. They've had 7 editions. You can still play those original adventures with the 7th edition rules. All you have to do is multiply the stats by 5. Everything still works. And from 1st through to 6th edition, all it was tweaks to the character skills and little rewrites here and there. But the basic rules remained the same. Each revision was just a cleaning up of the text, adding more information, coming out with something that looked more professional, step by step by step by step by step. But you could quite happily play a 1st edition Call of Cthulhu adventure with 5th edition, 3rd edition, 7th edition, whatever. And for me, that's how you do it, because you don't piss off your loyal fans in that way. Anyhow, that's my opinion. What do you guys think? Silence.
I'm allowing a pause for somebody else to speak up right away instead of me for once. But
well, that other person is Graham,
who is on mute.
He isn't showing us mute on my screen. Okay, off you go, Elfbait. Go on.
Oh, never mind. Actually, never mind. I just can't read icons. That's his camera. So I would venture a guess that one of the reasons that Call of Cthulhu, at least, didn't do too many drastic things. Well, actually, 2 reasons. First of all, their game system was already pretty solid and didn't require a lot of tweaking. It's not as dynamic a game as, say, D&D is. So there's not as much. And as far as like the action in the game, combat is a little bit more straightforward and deadly. And so there weren't a lot of tweaks to be made there. Not to mention, they have a smaller market share to lose if they really do piss people off.
Well, that's what we found out. I found out recently. Call of Cthulhu is the biggest game in Japan and one of the biggest in Spain. Okay, the American market is the biggest market, but I'd imagine the Japanese market is pretty sizable for Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, but their core market, I'm sure, is here, and like a lot of RPGs, and so that probably, I mean, I would say number one is probably because the game is so solid to begin with, and had already been used in a number of permutations already, because it had been used for Stormbringer, it had been used for RuneQuest, it had been used for the ElfQuest RPG. There's a lot of different games that basic, what do they call it? Basic role-playing system or whatever it is. Can't remember what their core system they call it. So yeah, I don't think it. I mean, in general, I don't have a problem with new additions as long as they accomplish something. As a wargamer, I see a lot of additions come through. But most war games, when they come out with a new edition, it's either because the old edition has not been in print for a while, and so maybe the last printing may have been in 1980 some odd, when desktop publishing and just general graphics and everything weren't all that great, and suddenly they're like, we're going to bring it back, circa 2000 blah blah blah, and now they have all these new tools available to them, and those are good. Game systems that have been around for a long time and have grown through the organic growth through newsletters, supplements, whatever, often need a new edition to consolidate that.
Yes,
And that's where
yeah,
it's
that's
good. I feel like D&D is not a good example of editions because it is an outlier. It's an outlier. Most people
yes, it
don't
is.
besides D&D, besides WotC, Games Workshop is the only other company that just does editions for edition's sake. And they do it at a nauseating rate. They're already
These
on
are
what,
these are the
ninth or
big
10th edition for Warhammer 40K.
these are the big corporate entities that are doing that, though, aren't they?
Yes, they are also the publicly traded companies.
Yes,
And that then requires shareholder happiness, and which
yeah.
requires all kinds of shenanigans, broad market appeal. Often, which fifth edition shows that right now. A lot of the big complaints about the things that they're doing with fifth edition are very intelligent business decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that certainly with D&D, because of the size of it, each Wizards of the Coast edition is designed to bring in the new wave of youngsters and appeal to the new wave of teens each time.
Yeah,
and it does feel like, it sort of pushes the 30 and 40 somethings out. Each time there's a new edition.
I would almost venture though that it doesn't, because I remember hearing somewhere, and I know this has definitely been said about Games Workshop and their Warhammer games, but also about D&D, that older players don't generally gravitate to newer editions. They just keep playing the edition they have. And so while you may gain a few of them, I don't think the intention is ever to displease or displace older gamers. It's that they're not really buying anything anymore. At least not at a rate that a company can make a business out of.
I mean, if Wizards of the Coast were to put out basic framework modules for old editions of D&D, I would still buy them. But you're right, I wouldn't buy them at the rate that maybe a youngster will go out spending their disposable income on 40-50 pound rule books, $60-70 over where you are, and binge on them in a year, and probably push them under the bed after 2 or 3 years when they move on to something new, because it's a bit of a fad. And as kids, we all had fads at times, whether it was collecting stickers or gaming. I mean, certainly when I first got into gaming, I wanted to spend every penny I'd got on D&D stuff, which probably wasn't the wisest thing in the world. But when I got to about 18, 19, I wanted to spend every penny I got down the pub. So you go through phases, and I think they're trying to jump on those phases with the youngsters.
Yeah, to kind of mirroring Games Workshop again, I was told once by a Games Workshop employee that they're not interested in keeping long-term players, that they're actually interested in getting new players. And the reason that they cycle their editions so frequently is that for anybody playing in the lifespan of Games Workshop's games, the current edition that's out is probably the only edition they will have ever had known and will know. I have to venture that a good chunk of 5e's, 5e being the role playing side of that, I'm pretty sure WotC is counting on a lot of people buying a lot of books and playing for a few years and then moving on. A lot of new people coming to the game, and they want to make sure that there are sellable items there. I've seen some comments in the comment section about, is a new edition needed? I guess to answer that, you have to look at whose need we're talking about. players never need a new edition.
No.
I mean, unless the original edition is like OD&D, where it's a convoluted mess and it really does need a new edition, we don't need a new edition, and that's why you have OSR.
As you said, it's shareholders that need a new
shareholders and the businesses who want to stay open. Yeah. My biggest fear, honestly, with WotC having D&D is the day that D&D doesn't end up being profitable. Hasbro is just going to lock it in the vault. They don't give up. They don't give up IPs. And so if they don't produce it, who will?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, people also associate the whole role-playing game hobby with Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh yeah.
I mean, some of my group used to refer to our gaming night as D&D night, even when we were playing Call of Cthulhu.
Oh yeah, and that's sort of that. There's a whole other conversation there with trademark and brand recognition. It's the it's the Jello comment. Like when everything is D&D, is anything D&D?
Yeah.
Professor Dungeon Master just did a video on this, actually. Interestingly enough, he's like, when it comes down to it, all editions of D&D are basically the same, with minor tweaks. I mean, 5th edition is not. I've seen some comments also about their new games. Yes, but they're all recognizably D&D, with maybe the notable exception of fourth edition, and even it still had the. I mean, Pathfinder is basically D&D to mirror Professor Dungeon Master.
It is. And most of the OSR clones are D&D.
Yeah, even the ones that stray a bit further, like Dungeon Crawl Classics and stuff like that. But yeah, they're all pretty much D&D, and a lot of games that even maybe on the surface don't have any of the outward dressing of D&D, like maybe they've changed the stat names and stuff like that. A lot of them are still D&D.
Yeah, the mechanics are so similar. That D20 base, and various hit dice for various classes, and
even where the stats and the rules and the mechanics change, a lot of them are still D&D because you're still doing the same thing. Yeah. I mentioned in the last stream, my brother has been trying to sell me on the Cortex rule system, and I keep looking at him. I'm like, okay, I get that you love this system, but why should I? What is it that this system is going to do differently that I can't already do with the systems I play?
Yeah.
If we're talking about dungeon crawling, they're within some minor permutations. I'm pretty sure D&D's got it kind of zeroed in.
It was a game that was designed to do that.
Yeah.
Graham, are you back? Are you?
I am. I'm listening. I've not had a huge amount to contribute so far, but enjoying the conversation. And
feel free to dive in and interrupt us whenever you wish.
Okay, carry on, and I will interrupt.
I mean, Malachi makes the point here that we all are already aware of, but it's worth bringing it up. The key with all the TSR editions of D&D were that some required little bits of tweaking, but you can use material from 2nd edition with basic D&D, with 1st edition, maybe even with OD&D.
Oh yeah, a lot of us didn't even know the difference and managed perfectly fine.
We didn't. We just thought that 2nd edition on the 2nd edition AD&D books was just like, here's a new way of presenting the rules. We didn't assume it was a different game, and I ended up pulling bits from all the versions in my games as a result. And Wizards of the Coast, as we've said, have got a completely different philosophy. They draw a line under an edition and say, right, here's a new one. If you want to play it, you've got to buy all these new books. Thank you for your $200 or whatever it is you need to spend on this new edition.
I think they may have actually figured that out with 5th edition, though. And I'm going to give them probably a little bit more credit than a lot of people do, but third edition was their takeover of D&D.
Yes.
And third edition was WotC's first attempt to make D&D. They wrote it based on a lot of feedback that had been circulating in the gaming community about inconsistencies and all of these they're trying to modernize things to get rid of the THACO and stuff to where they had ascending out armor class and all that. And so but I think it suffered from a big bloat. Their second attempt was fourth edition, and I feel like it's not really fair to criticize WotC for creating widely different games, versions of D&D, when they were trying to find ways to make D&D relevant again and marketable. Because when you look at fifth edition is the closest to first and second edition that D&D has been in a long time as far as mechanics go.
I feel it has strong similarities at low levels, but the more you go up through the levels, the more you see the elements of third and fourth edition.
Yeah, I think that has more to do with the kind of window dressing and the power creep in it, but the core of the system, the mechanics of the system, are very much old D&D. If you do something like, for example, Adventures in Middle Earth, the fifth edition system version, you can see that it plays a little bit more like you would have with a first or second edition AD&D. If you play any of the hardcore versions, exactly, of fifth edition, you see them strip away all of that superpower and it starts playing like D&D again. Low Fantasy Gaming, which is an OSR styled game, is to a great degree a OSR-ified fifth edition, and it plays I feel like WotC before Hasbro took over is one entity, and they got two editions out, which is, for all intents and purposes, one edition less than, like, one real edition, like cleaned and polished edition than TSR got.
I think the problem, I think you've sort of hinted it there, but the problem with fifth edition of WotC, from what I can see, is WotC did create a basic framework, as you say, that does feel like D&D again, at its most basic level. But the companies that have produced the best products after using that framework are not WotC. WotC have then sort of slipped back to their old ways of bloating the edition and making it far too fantastical, in my opinion. And as you say, those revisions by other companies, for example, Cubicle 7 with Adventures in Middle-earth, they've done a better job of using those base mechanics to create a game that feels more like what us old schoolers want to see in D&D.
Yeah, I think as old school folks, though, we have to be careful there too, because we're really not the people that are. We're not ever going to be the core market again. We've played our games, we've made our decisions, we're stuck in our ways, and there are much more spendy, youthful dollars that are out there ready to snap. And times change. I am willing to say that I am probably not the gamer that companies want to court as a customer anymore. And not in any hostile way, just that I'm stuck in my ways to a great degree, and the world changes.
There again, I mean, I look at what I've spent, for example, in the last few months on gaming. I've bought the Conan book, £36, including postage. I've bought the first edition MERP Moria guide. That cost me £20 on eBay, and I've just bought a couple of the revised reprintings of the Fighting Fantasy books, waiting for those to arrive. I bought those on eBay as well.
Chasing the dragon of nostalgia.
Yeah, but that's an average of £30 a month.
Yeah.
Put that over a year, you're talking £300 or £400. But Watsy aren't getting that money off me because they're not putting out content that I'm interested in.
Yeah, but for every one of you that they don't sell to, they're selling to probably 10 or 15 other people.
That is true. But
and again, Watsy, I think it's safe to say when we talk about Watsy, we're talking about the creative arm of Hasbro.
Yes.
Because Watsy is the creative arm. And it's interestingly enough, I'm going to harken back to that last Professor Dungeon Master video that he just dropped. Nobody who writes for 5th edition plays it the way it is in the book. Nobody who ever written for D&D plays it the way that it's in the books. Everybody plays their own version of D&D. So at the end of the day,
played his own version of D&D.
I'm sure Gygax played his own version of D&D that changed month to month. We all did. Like we'd read a new Dragon article, suddenly D&D is different. And to that end, companies who are trying to make a business out of it and who aren't just doing it for love and hobby money are going to be producing to set a baseline to keep the game there and relevant. I would say as much as people want to rattle their sabers and get grumpy and angry at Watsy and Hasbro, if they're accomplishing nothing else, they're accomplishing keeping people rolling dice and using their imaginations and not just running off to video game land. I mean, I love my video games. Don't get me wrong.
I just want to pick up on Shadow and Son's point here. The main reason why D&D in particular, ADD first, basic, expert, and second edition, has all gone up in value in the last 10 years is because of us. We are all those of us who played those editions tend to be the sort of people whose kids are reaching the age where they can fly the nest, where if we've bought a house, our mortgage doesn't hit us quite as badly as it used to. I mean, when I bought my house, I remember my mortgage was a high percentage of my earnings.
I'm the wrong guy to listen to talk to. I just bought my house.
But at that time, I was earning £12,000 a year. So, and that was our entire family income because my wife was finishing off her college degree. So our mortgage was a big chunk of that. My kids are now old enough for my wife to work. I'm not earning a lot more anyway. My daughter's now hit 18, so she's just started working. So all of a sudden, that mortgage payment, which we took out 20 years ago, is a very small percentage of what we earn. Thus, we have a little bit more spending money. And I'm using that to chase my childhood nostalgia. And that same thing is happening with so many people of the same age. We're all reaching that age where we've got that little, okay, belts are tight for a lot of people, but in general, we have that little bit more spare spending. We're not going out and boozing it away like we did in our 20s. We've got a bit more sensible. We don't chase the latest fashions. We've just got a bit of spare cash about. So we are spending it. And with us, we are creating demand on places like eBay. And thus that demand and scarcity due to time going by, things will become more, old things will become generally more scarce. We're pushing the price up.
Yeah, it's not due to any like actual greater value intrinsic to the items themselves. It's like any collectible.
Yeah,
they're valuable because old school original gaming stuff is valuable the same reason that truly valuable comic books are valuable, not the manufactured value of the 90s when they were just dumping stuff onto the shelves. The fact is that the vast majority of the gaming books were bought, used, abused,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
ripped to shreds, colored in. So finding a quality version is going to be really hard. And the one thing I can tell you about is the popularity of new D&D is definitely driving the sales of those old ones, because before
It is,
5th
definitely.
edition took off, I could go to the secondhand bookstores and find shelves full of just about any RPG and then be able to buy it at dirt cheap. And even non-D&D games are getting hard to find for less than premium values, because that nostalgia wave also hits newer, younger people. They're like, hey, this game's been around for 5 editions. I'm wondering what the old one is. Or, hey, I remember my dad trying to play this with me when I was 10, and they're going out and buying those. Or there's some people who just want to collect them. I'm on a Star Frontiers Facebook group, and there's a guy on there who I simultaneously absolutely adore his collection, but also want to reach out and smack him, because he's showing these pictures of like, hey, here's all my 15 sealed copies of the Alpha Dawn box set. You know,
And what
you
the point?
well, and I'm like, thanks. That's 14 more copies of that aren't in circulation, and you're just sitting on them for what reason? Just so you can show off your wall of swag.
Yeah.
But there are also a lot of modern collectors who that's the only reason they're getting. I have an original Monster Manual. Look at this; it's in near perfect condition.
Yeah. I mean, Malachi says here he's surprised that the rules compendium has not decreased in price since the print on demand was made available. I'm going to say here now, I have never bought a print on demand product.
I have.
In terms of the original modules, I don't like the fact that they don't come with the original sort of cardboard outer sleeve. I don't find them as usable. Graham's disappeared. I don't find them as usable, but there is something for me about owning an original. I know it's me being probably a bit snobbish about it and maybe a bit too pedantic about it, but I would much rather own a battered old original than a brand new print on demand.
Oh yeah,
and I'm willing to pay that extra for it.
I mean, Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro have made all, again, going to Star Frontiers, they have all of the Star Frontiers stuff available on DriveThruRPG for print on demand, but I much rather just hold on to my old ragged, stuck together with cellophane tape, box set, rather than
Mage's Musings is right. Mage's Musings is right here. He likes the print on demand copies because they're cheap and he can wreck them through wear and tear. I will admit that if I'm running an old adventure, I don't get my old original module out to do it. I will find a dodgy PDF and print it out and use that and highlight that.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, I've bought the original. It's set up, and that's not coming out. That's not coming out for not unless I can help it. Because I want to look after my stuff that's up there. That's my stuff to read and prepare from. But if I'm taking it to a gaming table and there's food and drinks sloshing around, I don't particularly want my 40-year-old books to be in the firing line.
I'll at least run it through my printer scanner and
yeah, of
make
course,
a reference copy.
Yep. So I mean, I've never bought a PDF. I've never bought a print on demand. I'll always buy either new or secondhand through eBay. But yeah, Elle says here, print each player's spells. Yes, I do that. I'll print spells out for the players to help them if they haven't got copies of the books. Anyway, we've wandered off the topic. We haven't got Saxia still hasn't got his internet sorted, so we don't have that Viking with a whip.
What are they building it with? Building it from scratch for him? I mean,
I haven't got a clue.
bespoke internet.
I haven't got a clue. Right, so yeah,
15 trolls with cans and string. I mean, I don't know.
but we've covered certainly AD&D and becoming 3rd edition, 4th edition, 5th edition, and all that sort of stuff. And they have claimed that 6th edition is going to be backwards compatible. I don't know how true that will be. I'm sure they'll want you to buy the books again. I certainly don't like their philosophy when it comes to the digital revisions. And so many people play digital now and play with the digital stuff nowadays. I'm just not interested in buying digital.
They've shown a real knack already for reasons to fear the digital revisions, because Spelljammer, when they released it, before people even had their physical copies, there had been some digital revisions. It's just, and so my fear is that their editorial process is going to wane with the patch mentality that they will allow themselves with the digital revision. It's like, I don't want to pay $50 to buy your beta version of D&D.
No,
you're give me a finished. I'm not paying for early access to your D&D.
Isn't that's some computer games manufacturers do that as well, don't they? They'll release a game before it's finished, and then a few weeks later, here's your patch. Now you can play it properly.
Well, yeah, I mean, I understand when an indie game designer does that, because they don't have the dollars to pump out a complete game, and often they use the players out there as their quality control. If you're a one-man deal or a small print, a small game house, cool. But when AAA companies figured out that, it started with DLC. They when they could justify DLC, now they actually will release incomplete games and then sell you the rest of it and call it a DLC.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Which is funny though, because us, D&D players, we bought DLC all the time. It was called modules, but
true. But they felt like proper substantial add-ons.
I know it's not the same thing, and I don't think anybody would actually complain about DLC for games if they were released like modules. Can you imagine having Fallout, and then every few months they released a self-contained full adventure for Fallout as DLC? Sure, I think everybody could get behind that. A constant stream of new content for your favorite video game. Why not?
Halakar has the key point here. If 6th edition makes Forest Oracle a decent adventure, then it's won. It's won D&D. It's as simple as that. I don't know. Have you ever read the Forest Oracle?
No. I've heard you lament about it.
It's absolute garbage.
Remember, I almost never run print material, so I almost do all homebrew.
If you want to have a laugh, just read the first 4 or 5 encounters of Forest Oracle. Oh my god!
Yeah, your description made sure that I will never do that again. No, I will never do that ever, not again. But
yeah, I know how. I may consider the 5th edition conversion of Tomb of Horrors to be absolutely bloody awful. It's not a patch on the Forest Oracle. It really isn't. It's not a patch on how bad Forest Oracle was. Anyhow, I'm looking at my notes here, and basic D&D went through a very quick cycle of new versions. The Mensa boxes came out just 2 years after the Mulvey boxes. But I don't remember the complaints back then that we have nowadays, because everything was neatly backward compatible. Anyway, we've covered that.
We also didn't have as open a forum for bitching and moaning either. So
yeah, true. That is very, very true. Right, games that I'm going to come to some games I think got better with new versions, or went up and down with the versions. Paranoia. Paranoia is a great game. It's not a campaign game. It's designed specifically for one-shots. It is a lot of fun. But I will say now, and I am right in saying this, that second edition Paranoia is the best version. Bar none. It took the idea of first edition, it simplified it to make it streamlined, and the essence of a Paranoia session is that the DM shouldn't be having to worry about mechanics. The game basically says DM doesn't need, whoever's running it doesn't need to worry about mechanics anyway. But second edition basically made it so simple. Even if you want to use some mechanics, they're really easy. It's just a D20 roll under the skill. That's it. Nothing more complicated than that. But first edition was a little bit obtuse. Second edition, lovely and smooth. Third edition, which they called fifth edition as a joke, was absolutely woeful. And then you had Paranoia XP, which tried to combine 3 different ways of playing, which I found out tonight. Microsoft tried to sue them over using XP in the title. But second edition for Paranoia was necessary, was worthwhile, and if you ever want to play Paranoia, second edition is the one to get. Yeah, Edor says here, first edition Paranoia is a pretty crunchy, hard sci-fi game. It was too crunchy for what it was trying to do. The second edition just stripped it out and got it spot on. It got the tone, the comedy, the darkness, the everything perfect. So that was an example of a necessary revision working and not being any form of cash grab. Did you play Paranoia, Elfbait, at all?
I did not. It was far too silly for me when it was out back in the day.
Oh, it is silly. It's a short doses, one shot. You play a one shot of it, then go back to your regular campaign. Then a few months later, you crack out the Paranoia again for a daft session.
Yeah, I just went for a good chunk of my gaming time, and to be fair, I mean, even to this day, I have a hard time doing silly in RPGs, and so a lot of games that were specifically designed for silly, just didn't hit my table.
Larissa says here, I mean, I've mentioned Call of Cthulhu already as being an example of exactly how to do a revision. And yes, I think Call of Cthulhu, I've got 6th edition up there. I learned with 6th edition. And I'm aware that learning 6th edition means I can play 1st edition without any real worry. But 7th edition was the first real departure. It was still compatible with the old stuff, but it has just got better and better and better.
Yeah, getting rid of the resistance table was one of the biggest accomplishments, honestly.
Yes.
It's just like the resistance table was really convoluted, having to constantly refer to a table when you're trying to do just about any action that was opposed. So
yes, and in to keep the tone of a Call of Cthulhu game going, you don't want to be referring to too many tables.
Just any game. I mean, because like even with the fantasy adventure games, those are usually very action oriented, and you don't want to constantly have to break the action to fumble around a resistance table just because somebody's trying to strength off.
Lionel Hutz has got it right here as well. The 7th edition starter set for Call of Cthulhu, I've got it. It's absolutely magnificent. You get a simple, sensible rulebook. You get some easy to run adventures that ease you in nicely, and you get a solo adventure, Alone Against the Flames, which is a lot of fun. And it what 20 quid? It is a lesson in how to do a starter set for a role playing game. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
I think 5th edition's D&D Essentials is actually a really good one. Even though they have 2 different starter sets, D&D Essentials is much better. The adventures in the starter sets are kind of flat, whereas D&D Essentials actually runs you up through 6 levels.
Right.
So
I haven't got the 5th edition essential starter set. I didn't feel I needed it, and I was already sort of starting to get grumpy towards 5th edition when that came out.
I would not have picked it up except for while I was getting paid to be a DM for a bit for a shop. The store owner fronted me a copy, and I had sort of poo-pooed them, like, who needs a starter set? Back in my day, we just picked up and then I went through it and I'm looking at it. I'm like, not only is this a good beginning thing to pick up for maybe somebody who's not brand new to role playing, but is wanting to start D&D, wants to get in and have enough meat to go through 6 levels and maybe grow some more. But also the abridged sort of not abridged, but the slimmed down version of the rules it presents the little rules booklet in there. It's a great table resource.
A question though, there though, as a game, as an introduction role, than the basic set from 1983, Frank's basic D&D red box set.
You broke up a bit there, but
oh, sorry. Would you say that 5th edition Essentials starter set was better or worse than the basic starter set for basic D&D that was released in 1983? That red box one written by Frank Mentzer, if you ever saw it.
So Essentials is not better than that. And actually, currently the new starter set for 5th edition, the brand new one, even though it relies on nostalgia bait, and I hate it for that, is better as a learning tool, because it really actually breaks down the why and the how of playing the game throughout the starter set. And that is one thing that the D&D Essentials box set doesn't have for 5th edition. The nice thing about the D&D Essentials box set is you get 6 levels worth of play for $20. And
that's okay. I mean, that's that is fine.
Yeah. It also allows you to make your own characters, whereas the 5th edition starter sets have pre-gens and do not have character generation rules, which I think is missing. But it's kind of a miss, because I think you'll learn a lot by generating characters. But those old box sets, because keep in mind, I came in with Mulvey. That was the first set I ever owned. I had seen the Mentzer set and stuff, but and I came in with Mulvey, and I always get them out of order. But the examples of play, while they weren't like a mechanical breakdown, just the kind of mock game session that they had in those basic and expert books, I thought was always useful. Where these, the DM's describing what's going on. And
is it not a little bit sad though that we've had all these other versions of D&D that have come out since that 1983 box set, and nothing has ever done it really better than that as an introduction to Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, I think that's a shortcoming that they've recognized with this newest starter set for 5th edition, but it's taken that long. I think they rely far too much on RPGs not being such a strange and weird thing anymore as they were back then. Also, they rely, I think, on third-party context more than we ever could have. Because nowadays, if you're wanting to figure out how to or get into anything, it's just a YouTube away, or a Google away. That was not an option in 1980s. So yeah, you could. It's just like bad, bad TV and movies nowadays, where you have to rely on viral media additions to understand what's going on in the full feature release of the movie. It's not
Right.
great design, but it's something you can get away with now.
Now, L says here, I remember seeing First Quest, but I never, ever got to use it. So, was it better than Frank Mentzer's box set? I don't know. I really don't know, because by then I didn't need a starter set, and I mean I saw it, but I don't know anyone who, certainly in my circles, who ever bought it. Maybe it got more traction in the States because it did feel like gaming was waning a little bit when it came out here in Britain. But I don't know, did you ever see First Quest? Because I've never.
I saw it, never did anything with it though.
Well, I may be proved wrong. I might have to. I might have to look up that First Quest thing. But as I said, I never had it. But certainly over here in the UK, it might have just been me hitting a certain age where I was going to the pub rather than playing games. But I do remember gaming shops and gaming aisles on other shops and other stores slowly getting smaller, and Games Workshop shifting their focus to miniatures. They used to be the big PG, and they went to get D&D stuff from, you had to seek out little shops. And when I was a kid, age 14, 15, you go to a Games Workshop, or you go to a big sort of general, not a department store. The toy and book sections in department stores used to have them. Then all of a sudden they didn't. Am I? Oh, I'm breaking up. I'm breaking up. I'm gonna close. Can you all hear me okay in chat? Because we appear to have lost Elfbait. Uh-oh. Elfbait has just said he's had to step away for a bit. So I'm breaking up. I know why I'm breaking up. It's because my daughter's just come home and she's probably just put the internet on. Good. Glad you can still hear me. So L, if you say if many people did buy it, then good. Glad they did. I just didn't see it over here. I sound better now. Good. Excellent. Right, it might have just been a little wobble. So while I'm by myself, anyone wants to join me, you're more than welcome to do so. Before Elfbait comes back, I think Graham's going to come back after he's had his dinner. I'm going to go to another game that I played quite a lot of, that is up and down in terms of versions, and that's Car Wars. When I was playing it with my mates in the mid-80s, we were playing the first edition of Car Wars. Very simple, quite complex. Well, I'm just being invaded. It was quite a small rule book. There weren't a lot of options, and the second edition basically combined various add-ons. I'm just being distracted a little. Just bear with me. The second edition basically was called the Deluxe Edition. It combined a lot of add-ons into the main book. Then they came out with a compendium, which simplified the turn structure and gave you this little turning key, this little cardboard turning key, which stopped the arguments. And I'm going to say here that third edition Car Wars lost the bet, because fourth edition was just a bit of a cash grab on top of third edition, and then fifth edition ripped out the whole car designing part of it, which was nonsensical, because that was the main fun.
I
I'm
will
going to add people
say,
back to the stream.
hey,
We
I'm
have
back.
Off-Bait
Sorry,
back, and we have Omen Owl. There we go. They're back again.
yeah,
Right,
just
good.
step away
I
real
was just
quick.
wobbling. I was just wobbling on about Car Wars, which has had 5 editions that I know of. And I think 3rd edition was the best version because it had ironed out the oddities of and slightly overly crunchiness of 1st edition. 2nd edition combined options, and then 3rd edition defined the rules. So. Hello, Omen Owl.
Yeah.
Nice to see you. Oh, Omen Owl's muted.
All right. Sorry about that. No, I was trying to plug in everything. So
Yeah, there's
That's
a
quite all right.
sad tale of editions when it comes to Star Frontiers. I know you're not a huge science fiction fan, but
Not at all.
Star Frontiers died in its 2nd edition, and what was released wasn't even a complete edition.
well, Star Frontiers, I mean, it was sabotaged is my best feeling.
Well, yes, it was, but that, like I said, that's what makes it a sad tale of editions. It got a 2nd edition that should never have happened. Then wasn't that edition wasn't even completed, and the whole edition was written by somebody who didn't like Star Frontiers and was greenlit by somebody who didn't even want Star Frontiers. So
you know what though is everything I heard from, I liked David Zeb Cook actually when he was doing his stuff. I didn't like the system for it, but I was told that he was told never to discuss it or anything. It was kind of like I didn't have a feeling he didn't like it kind of thing, but he definitely changed up all the rules. And from my perspective, and I always have different feelings when people say about different editions. I don't mind different editions if you're changing up the rule set, oddly enough.
well, Zeb Cook didn't write Zebulon's Guide.
Oh, I thought that he was the main person on it.
No, in fact, it's almost a kick in the teeth that they named it Zebulon's Guide, because he was really instrumental in the original edition.
Yeah.
Which you can actually, it's kind of funny there. I mean, his DNA runs from Isle of Dread through to Star Frontiers and into Spelljammer. But from the way I understand it is the writer of Zebulon's Guide was a much bigger fan of Gamma World, and so was trying to write Gamma World elements, and in fact wrote some of his own campaign Gamma World elements into Star Frontiers. And then that was at the same time that I can't remember what her name was, who was in charge of TSR at the time.
Uh-huh.
She had procured the rights.
You mean Lorraine Williams? Yeah.
Yeah, she got the rights to Buck Rogers, and so she didn't want to have Star Frontiers competing against her Buck Rogers game, and so they basically pulled the rug out from under Star Frontiers and pumped it all into Buck Rogers, which then crashed and burned. So,
well, I mean, I don't mind, because we're all looking at certain things. And my view on this is, and as much as people talk about 1st edition, it's not really 1st edition. The white box was really the 1st edition of D&D. I mean, when we start looking at it, which is why we're saying advanced Dungeons and Dragons and basic Dungeons and Dragons. If you look at the white box, you can see where the evolution starts coming in. And, I think that basic was the most streamlined and really didn't require that much, because they kept it fairly narrow, and then they would add something to it. I think the problem is that when you get to a lot of these is they get massive amounts of bloat. And because there's so much bloat, and I understand, we can talk about planned obsolescence. That really doesn't bother me. But there's a certain point where the system goes so off the rails, you have to almost reboot it by putting it in a 2nd edition. And that's how I felt like with Unearthed Arcana. And then 2E blew up too much that they then tried. And 3.5 to me is a different game than 1 or 2E. It has a completely different feel along with 5E. They're not directly compatible. I can pretty much bring a module from basic, advanced, 1st or 2nd edition, and people can play it with a little modifications. And once you get to 3.5 or 5, I'm like, well, you really need like Goodman Games to come in and really work on that. And I agree with Lionel Hutz is putting there. The revision totally changed the game into something else. Well, I mean, Shadowrun. Look at the difference between. I mean, first and second, there's a big difference. Second and third are pretty similar, but third and fourth are completely new games.
For me, I think the game becomes something else when you get to the point where if you have scenarios and supplements, you can't just run them on the fly. You have to actually sit down and re-crunch the variables that are in them in order to make them work. That's what I felt, that certainly those earlier versions of D&D were pretty much the same game. I know people will argue of differences, but you could pick up the Isle of Dread and you could run it in AD&D. You could pick up the Village of Homlet and you could run it in basic D&D with only minor tweaks.
You could run Isle of Dread in second edition too. I mean,
yeah.
Because second edition wasn't that much different. I mean,
yeah,
that's the point I'm making. But if you pick up, say for example, Isle of Dread and you run with third edition rules, you have to pretty much rework all the monster crunch before you can even start.
Yeah,
because
I will say, oh, good, sorry.
And because you can't just pull the monster stats out of the book, you've got to reconsider so many different mechanics. I mean, I would say Call of Cthulhu is, even with the change to the resistance tables and the addition of the luck mechanic and the multiplication of all the stats by 5 for 7th edition, it still feels the same game at its core. Just as core second edition without the bloat still felt like you're playing D&D. It didn't feel all that much different to playing a game of basic, because the core mechanics were the same.
Yeah, I think third edition, like I was saying earlier, I don't blame. Well, blame is not the word. I can't be too overly critical of 3.5 existing and being very different. D&D had really waned when they wrote it. Because I remember when third edition came out, I didn't even know it had come out, and then I'm like, where the hell did a new edition of D&D come from? Because D&D was kind of off my radar at that time. I was playing things like Star Wars and other things with my friends for the longest time. And, somebody picked me up a copy of the third edition rule book, and I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. Again, they wrote that one, and the reason it's so cumbersome is D&D had become so disjointed and hacked together through umpty billion editions, 8 million Dragon magazine articles, and they were trying to write something that was cohesive. And they probably overwrote it. I mean, they obviously overwrote it, but yeah.
I mean, I'm not even against. I know everyone says, "Well, I can always use the old editions." Of course you can, and you're welcome to play them. And I'm glad nowadays we have the drive-through RPG to do so. I also like seeing new systems all the time. So, to me, if you can bring out a new edition, now I'll be honest. I usually think the first edition is usually a beta test edition, whether people like it or not. And then the second edition comes out and says, "Oops, while this may have worked here, it didn't work over there." And so they come back and fix it. And a perfect example was Vampire, which admittedly came out with the second edition almost a year later. And said,
what's hilarious? Vampire was so obscure and was so non-combat. This a weird tale of editions. When they came out with the player's guide that introduced the more advanced combat rules, most people playing it didn't even know how combat really worked in Vampire, because it was such a non-combat game. And I remember being a more combat-oriented player, having come from D&D, playing in games and having people yell and scream for referees and stuff, because I was doing a lot of online text-based gaming at the time when that came out, and having people scream for referees because I was cheating when I was using the combat system the way it was written. Because a good example is the firearms rules would give you bonus successes, not bonus dice, but bonus successes, depending on the type of weapon. And so I'd sit there and shoot people. I just shoot vampires with high caliber weapons or werewolves with high caliber weapons and be like, oh, you're not rolling dice. I'm like, I don't have to. So it was just such an obscure period in the game. Talk about, additions that are beta tests. They didn't even have a fully fledged combat system when the first book came out.
Well, I remember the celerity. A lot of things were completely overpowered. The experience points were much lower, so you could advance very, very quickly. And I said, okay, fine. I understand that. I mean, really, and I have the 20th edition just because I'm grabbing some of the stuff I grab for collector's aspects, or I want, okay, that's some editions, I think, as things come through, they're like, okay, we need to rewrite this to make it clearer. I'm not against new editions all the time. I don't feel forced to buy editions nowadays. I mean, that's the nice thing about it. Unless, it used to be, oh, I've got to keep up. I got to keep up. There's so many games out there now.
In that sense, OD&D feels like a beta test.
Yeah.
I'm going to welcome someone to my stream who I've seen on lots of the streams, who has not been on one of my streams before. So in you come, Shadow and Sun. Come and say hello to everybody.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Omen and I, we go back a ways. It's nice to get to meet you guys. I'm an old fart, 67. And my mortal enemy is planned obsolescence. The companies that go out and put out a game for the sheer sake of putting out a game to make more money to keep their IP alive, they won't get my money.
I'm going to say, Shadow, are you really 67, or were you born in 1967?
I was born in 67.
Oh, you were born in 67. I was going to say you don't look 67.
Thank you.
Far too much hair for a 67-year-old. I'm jealous of your hair.
I'm lucky. I'm retired. I've been retired almost 20 years now. I made some really smart choices, and I get to let my hair grow and not worry about it. And where I live, it's kind of like camouflage. I blend in with the locals, even though we may not agree on everything. But and I was in a metal band when I was young, so it's like
I'm trying to get my hair to grow, but this is as far as it goes.
And you know what? When I start getting the bald spot, I'm just gonna go shave it all off. But until then, I'm just gonna let my freak flag fly. I guess I don't know. I'm not really a hippie, but
So let me get this right. Vampire the Masquerade is on its 20th edition.
No, that's more like its 3rd edition. It's just the 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
Oh, it was the 20th anniversary, and they consolidated. And actually, I feel the same way. Speaking of things, Fantasy Flight they brought it out. Now you can't find it again. Was their 30th edition of Star Wars from the WEG?
Yeah.
Shadow knows what I'm talking about.
The box set, yeah.
No.
Yeah, West End Games. Yeah, I've got all the original stuff.
Yeah, they did the collectible. The Fantasy Flight did a boxed, like a sleeve box of the original 1st edition West End games.
And nice to meet you too, Elfie. I think I bumped into you a couple of places before, but
probably
it's always nice to get to speak to people.
I even had my own YouTube channel under this name Elfbait for a while, but so it may have been there.
What happened with that?
In
life?
Years and years and years of having the channel, I managed to accumulate like 70 followers, and was not really up for pumping the time into it to keep it going. So
no, that's a shame. I would reconsider when you get the option. Like I'm always talking with Omenal, because Omenal will just not let me go at the end of a stream, because he's got so much good things to say. these live streams and these live chats, even my 14-year-old son, who's part of my channel, he's made up his channel just because these chats are so addicting. With what we've all had to go through the last 2 years, being isolated, it's so nice to be able to, it's like a phone call with an old friend. You don't want to hang up. And I don't know if any of you guys watched RPG Elite's video, how he lost a friend recently, and I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. There's so many good people in our lives that we just take for granted. Don't. If there's someone you haven't talked to in a while, go talk to them.
Oh yeah, going through that right now with my parents, actually. So
exactly.
Feel for you, man.
Ennio, on the topic, Shadow and Son.
I need a new edition of my parents. That's what I need.
Shadow and Son.
Oh, you mean can I get them refreshed? I'm not sure. I like my old set.
So I was going to say Shadow and Son. So you said you don't like obsolescence in any game. Is there a second edition of a game though that you prefer to a first edition?
Oh yeah, I just did a review on Villains and Vigilantes. I know you're not a sci-fi guy, but it's a superhero game. It's a superhero game that it's now 55 pages that I can use to run any genre of game I want, from prehistoric to sci-fi. You name the genre, I could run a game. It's not rules heavy, but it's really intuitive on the way it uses your stats to determine your hit points and your body weight and things like that make more sense than you're just getting a D6 every level for no reason, in comparison to the damage that is done, how much you can carry, would determine how much physical strength you have behind an attack. For example, if you use a sword, the damage you do with the sword is, based partially on a die roll, but partially on, how much force you can deliver by equating that to how much you can lift or carry. So it's really, more based on your actual stats in a weird little mathematical formula that might be a little bit much for some people, but it's just multiplication. But I know that goes hard for some people. So multiplication has got to be just, algebraic in comparison.
Ultimately, if you've got a system where you can just pick up mechanics and drop it into pretty much whatever game you want to run, then surely that is a revision of the system that works best.
And I think most of us have had so much experience that if we were on a desert island with a game we didn't like, we could turn it into the game we liked with little to no effort. That's why, to me, it's just kind of like a huge scam. I've got 300 games that I'm never going to get around to playing all of them. Buying a new game, I'd rather play one of the old ones. And I'm still going to have as much fun with my friends. They're not going to complain like, oh, why are you bringing out this dusty old thing when the new shiny thing is on the shelf? Not everybody wants to dump their money in that way.
As long as that old dusty thing does what you want it to do, that's the key.
Exactly.
That's the key.
But you want to know something? I think some of what we're doing. We got Connell over here.
Yeah, here comes trouble.
What amazes me with all of this is when I was young, I wanted the nicest, newest, shiniest thing, and now I'm going back and I'm going. I'll wait until everyone comes in with their reviews, and I'd rather be a few years later and say, okay, now I'll bring it in. And so I say I'm more discerning, even though I'm spending probably thousands of dollars a year on RPGs. So, I gotta be honest for this. I mean,
Me too. No, my miniature hobby, goes directly into my main line, right into my veins. So I know what you're talking about.
And some of it is, I know that you say that there are a lot of old games. I like looking at the newer stuff as well, and I agree with you with setting, and I like seeing how they change things. I like the free league stuff. I'm like, oh, this is a really cool mechanic. I like this, and that's what I like to see. The problem that I have too often nowadays, which is whether it's 5e or several of these others, is they're pretty much the same with a different setting, and they're bloated, not getting what I want. Though, and I've been reading through Pugmire more and more. I really do appreciate.
That's something I can get behind. That's a completely. I don't care what the rules are. Tell me it's 6th edition. I don't care. It's the setting and the theme that got me hooked. I'm a big dog fan, and what I get to play dog. Yeah, and it's not the crappy traveler version. Okay, I'm in. I'm in.
Well,
It's that more important. I can't even keep all the new OSR, different, versions of the same old Dungeons and Dragons. I can't keep track of them all. I just can't. There's just,
no, I agree with you. When I look at it, I'm like, okay, I have OSC coming in. That's enough. I don't need any of the other versions. Maybe there's a little bit of difference here and there. Like, that's all I need for that one. It's funny because it's a completely different system. It's easier for me to differentiate. Whereas it's going to be very similar. Like I said with Pugmire, what I liked about it is looking at the rules now. They're very simple. They're very intuitive. I think they work out well. And I really wish 5e had gone more that direction than the direction it has gone, where I don't have to worry about all the different, where they talk about building characters and, if you do this, and by the time they're 20th level, they have they could do 600 points of damage in a round. And I went, yeah, but I, as a DM, if I have to deal with these players doing that, I'm just going to say, you know what? We're going to put the book down. After about 5th level, we're out. We'll go do some other game. I mean, that's...
Yeah, I would use reverse psychology on them. Oh, you're doing 600 points of damage? Well, the big bad only had 89, so you win in the first round. Okay.
Yeah.
Story's over.
Well, and Saxius mentions that, too, is when they were optimizing their characters. He's like, but this is too easy. He's like, you're the ones that optimize those characters. and I don't want that.
I'm just gonna dive in. Welcome back, Graham. I hope you enjoyed your dinner. And
yes, thank you.
Get a word in edgeways between Omen Owl and Shadow and Sun, who are having a lovely conversation. And then
Sorry, we do that.
Oh, don't
No
worry.
problem.
And hello, Connell. The first time you've popped in on one of my streams. We have spoken before on Legend of Myth.
Right. No, I watch your streams. Don't get me wrong, but I saw there was an open link, and I figured you're either going to let me on or not. I mean, it's okay. I'm Irish. I get it.
And he is my little brother, so you got to deal with me. You got to deal with him.
But I want to jump.
Little is very tall. Isn't that the joke, the meme that goes around? I can say that because I'm only 5'5".
Yeah, 3'3". Man, I could kill the Baron for that nonsense. That freaking ginger. But all joking aside, I kind of want to get into what Omenal and Shell were talking about, the newer editions versus the older editions. I jumped in at 3.5, where they basically give you a stack of books and says, go have fun. The simplicity of earlier editions was not anywhere near in sight. It shouldn't take me 20 books to build my one character, but it's kind of cool that I can use 20 books to build one character. And when it comes to newer edition, older editions, I normally just, if I'm going to buy a new edition, it's just going to be the handbook and the core. There is enough stories out there that I can retell using these systems as long as I have a general idea what I do. I mean, I could do the War of the Roses. I could do a Robin Hood. I can do a Cuchulainn, the Raid of the Black Bull. Stories,
And you can do all of this with something simple like basic D&D or OSE or something like that. You don't need 1,000,001 character combinations and books to do it. And there is this feeling. There is this feeling nowadays that you need a class to do everything, and that everyone needs powers to back up a concept or an idea. Whereas surely you should be able to do that through roleplay, through the way you design your character. One of my favorite characters I ever played was a simple second edition AD&D fighter. I rolled very bad intelligence and wisdom, so I made him an uneducated, illiterate tribesman. I rolled very low starting gold, so he wore hide armor and used very basic weapons, but it fitted the idea of him being a very basic tribesman who was illiterate, and he was a lot of fun. I had great fun with him.
Was he
Was he?
Welsh?
No,
Welsh.
I could have. I should have made him Welsh because he's a goat herder rather than a shepherd. So.
That's either that could be a Scot. I mean, it is what it is. But I don't mind. See, here's my rub. I don't mind running 5e because even professionally, as a professional DM, I can only make money off of what the crowd wants. What the mob wants will sell.
Yeah.
And if I try to push on earlier editions with them, I might get a couple bites. But if I want to guarantee full table every time I run, you have to do with what's popular. Yes, 5e is a pain in the ass. Yes, Twitter in 5e is a huge pain in the ass. But you see that light that's in my background? That's what keeps my lights on.
Yeah.
So
but
it's a 22 for me.
I know. I'm aware you run. You're paid to run games in a shop for people whoever turns up. So you've got to keep on top of the current zeitgeist in terms of what you're doing, because you are trying to bring new people in who want the shiniest new thing. You're not there to appeal to us old beardy types or 50-year-old fat bald blokes.
I have a few of those.
Well, Connell, I forget who it was. Someone was telling me, one of my friends, I think, there are actual ways to get paid to play online, and you can pick the system, you can pick the genre, you can pick your players through whatever vetting process you like, and you can be making $100 a game or more. I hear up to $200 depending on the number of players, I guess, for a 4 or 5 hour session. And you can, like I said, play what you want as opposed to, having to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. So you might want to look into that, especially when, D&D 1 starts really, pushing their weight around and saying, you got to do this, you got to do that.
Right.
Your store may be like, nobody's coming in, Connell. Sorry, no game.
Right. At the current moment, my owner, not my owner, but the owner of the shop is basically saying,
my owner,
not my owner. He gave me a sock. I'm a free elf. That's bad. Anyway.
Well, thanks for the 5e, reference to Harry Potter. So,
Dolby's not a free elf. He can go play Pathfinder like all the other elves. Whatever. But no, it's an interesting concept, and that did get pointed out to me. But problem with me staying in and doing that, because I would run off my laptop, but I need to go out in public so I don't drink. If you keep me home all the time,
that's what pubs are.
Illinois sucks. Illinois sucks when it comes to pubs, but that's neither here nor there. You guys have pretty much a ban on smoking over there as well, don't you, Yogi?
Yeah. It came in July 2007. I remember the date.
Yeah, so do I. It's the day that the Illinois Nazis won. But these new editions, I mean, you'll have in the last, the games from the moment it was dropped to now, you have a large crowd of people saying, no, this is the right system, or no, this is the right system. I refuse to say any system is completely correct across the board. It is what is best for you and your players. I don't like 5e, but I'll run it. I prefer Pathfinder. It has that crunch that I enjoy, where other people like you, Shadow, you like earlier editions. There's nothing wrong with that.
Here's one thing, though, Connell, because you are running. I mean, this whole stream's been generally about game evolutions and game versions. There's obviously 6th edition on the horizon. Are you going to have to adopt that?
For the most part, as I said, my the shop owner I watched my words that time around. That is basically saying no. We're going to stick with 5e as is. I talked to my players, and they're very much just happy with 5e at the current moment. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but as of right now, I'm 5x5 on staying with what I got.
Hey, I got a question for you guys, if you don't mind. I've been playing since like '79, and I've got hundreds of games that are stuck up in my thinking meat, and I'm running out of room in my brain, literally, for a new game that's especially a game that's as complicated. See what I'm talking about? As Pathfinder or 5e or what have you. When I've already got scores of role playing games stuck in my head. Having had to memorize these games. Connell, I know personally, he's only played a couple of different games. Somewhere down the road, you're going to find that your actual ability is going to be a part of the equation. Where how many more new systems can you learn before it starts leaking out your ears? Am I the only guy with that?
I get your argument.
But I think
I agree with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think with me, I try to hold the mechanics back away from the players as much as I possibly can, almost to hide the fact that I'm not always playing by the rules. A lot of the games I run, I only really bother to learn the absolute basics of the core mechanic. And then I wing it. I wing it from there, and I find I can retain things better that way. And I might be running. I run quite a lot of Call of Cthulhu, and I still browse through the rule book, and there's little snippets in there that I've never even thought about applying to a game, because I have my own way of doing it within the basic framework. So when I take on a new system, I will probably just read the absolute basics and then run it from there and ignore those bits that make it difficult to learn.
Well, I mean, I enjoy learning new systems within reason, but I want them to be rules light, is what I want to call it.
Yeah,
is I want them to be flexible. That's one of the reasons I like Conan 2D20. That makes it very easy for me, because I am not trying to find all of the different modifiers. That's the problem that I had because I used to be a terrible rules lawyer where I'd memorize the books, literally memorize the books. And I would argue with the DM about, well, this, I get +2 here, +3 here. And it did make for a better game. I mean, it didn't. It didn't make it better for me. It didn't make it better for them. And yet we mentally enjoyed it being 14 years old, because it was kind of a, hey, I know this rule better than you do, and I can pull out this rule from whatever page. But it doesn't make it for a better game for you or the other players. And I think that's a maturity aspect. But I like looking at, like, if it's something innovative, I enjoy it. I didn't mind the the inspiration mechanic in 5e. I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't think that it's a bad idea for the thing that blew my mind for like Vampire was we have a dice pool rather than just a D20, and the number of successes determine how well you're going to go. So that's what it comes down to. And how easy is it for the players to learn? Because I have noticed that so many players, and this is what's going to happen with 5e, whether they like it or not, is that a lot of people will not adopt it because as players, they have to learn a new system. They're not going to feel comfortable with it. And many of them are somewhat power gamers. And they're going to be like, but I've lost my safety blanket. I'm not familiar with it. And I think that's a maturity as a role player that you're like, I'll just roll with it. You tell me a system, I'll learn the basic set of rules. If I like the game, I'll actually buy the core book so I understand it better. But I'm not all wrapped into, well, you have to follow the exact rules anymore. But I think that's the problem that you're going to see with this going from 5e to 1D&D. And to be fair, it happened to all of us whenever we switch systems, is I have to learn a whole new system. We're talking hundreds of pages in the book. Forget
Exactly.
it. And, like I said, for Conan or some of these others, how many do I have to learn? I don't have to learn very much. I can give you a 5-page book, a booklet, and you'll be fine. And that's sometimes where things really ramp up. And I think that was the big advantage from 1E to 2E, is it was different, but it was similar enough. And the same thing happened.
Yeah, it was almost identical.
Yeah,
I'm doing a review on it right now, and the differences are, they're there.
Yeah.
But it's one of the easiest conversions from first to second, I think, in my experience. I could be wrong with Cthulhu and things like that, or Traveler's another actually pretty good example. But the changeover, I use the 1E and 2E interchangeably constantly.
The thing is,
one
of the biggest changes in between 1E and 2E was in initiative. Moving from the standard D6 group initiative to a D10 with various modifiers. But the key thing there is 2E does not break if you use 1E's 1D6 group initiative. And equally, you can port 2E's initiative into 1E without that breaking. And that's one reason why I think people do run 2E down for its lack of flavor, because the rule book was made more functional and less flowery. And yes, it was more understandable, but I think it got it right in a sense that you could just lift bits and pieces from basic and first edition into 2E, or you could just lift what you like from 2E and drop it in first edition, and nothing fell apart.
Second edition was really the end of the original Dungeons and Dragons compared to what it became, adding feats and things like that, to where and stacking character professions on top of character professions. Back in the old days, you picked a profession, you were stuck there unless you were going to be out of game for years training. And now you just magically video game style change your profession instantly upon going up a new level, and mixing and matching as however you see fit without any rhyme or reason. That's where I think the big change began.
I'm also
go on.
If you look at, I'll bring another one, Warhammer. I cannot tell you the difference between Warhammer Fantasy First Edition and Second Edition. And I have the PDFs of both. I think they were removed a little bit from one versus the other. And that may have been cost too. That's the other aspect, is we'll update the artwork. We'll do this. I understand refreshing things to make it legible. But boy, I know that third edition was so different from the previous editions that they pretty much meant. Now, what it reminds me of is Coke and New Coke. It was like, this is not what I wanted. And so that's where Zweihander came out and did their thing. And they basically did that copy while you had the Final Fantasy do theirs. But
first and second edition Warhammer are true first and second edition, though. They're an initial write-up, like you said, the beta release, the test drive, and the second edition is the refinement. Like, especially in terms of Games Workshop, they actually were making money and they could pour money into the production of their game.
Yeah, well, and 2E is huge. when you compare it to 1E, but you can take a character exactly from 1E and drop it into 2E, and they would never notice any real difference. But now if you look at 4E, I don't know if I actually probably prefer second versus 4E, but I can't say anything bad about 4E. I think there's some good things in that compared to it as well. But
I don't know if you guys noticed, but I've noticed that the third edition of a lot of games is where they actually start to go for the money grab. And I'm not just talking D&D. I'm talking Gamma World and Traveler and so many other games out there. They, first edition, obviously you got to have that. Second, they fix all the stuff. And then third edition, they realize they're making the money, to afford to do second edition. And they decide to just, turn it up to 11 and, start pumping out things for sake of the money as opposed to sake of, because they already perfected their game supposedly in second edition. let's make another edition so we can just keep making more money.
Well, and
which is the prime directive of any commercial enterprise. So I have no problem with new additions. Honestly, I'm going to be the dissenting voice. I'm not who new editions are written for. I said this earlier in the stream. New editions are not written for me. They're written for the guys coming after me. They're written to keep the game alive. They're written to keep the hobby alive. And if that means making money, by all means, make money. I still have my old stuff. I can play my old stuff. You know, yeah.
Well, I mean, I agree with Elfbait on this in one point, but I also look at it this way, which is the quality suffers. Even if, like I'll be honest, when I first started playing 5e, I was like, oh, this is great. I like it better than the other editions. The problem was the players were breaking the system, and rather than trying to fix the system from getting broken, they just made it more and more broken. And that was the problem that I really have with 5e is to make it the kind of game I want, I have to hack it so much, I'm just better off playing a different edition. But the reality for me is the first 6 books, basically, where you had Bolos, that was fine. You had the, the monster manuals, the 3 of those, Mordecaians and Bolos and the monster manual, and the DMG and the player's handbook. Overall, are pretty good. But once you get to Tasha's, even my friend who loves 5e said Tasha's went overboard. And it just kept going from there. And the quality of the books just don't seem to be there to compel me to buy more of their products.
The problem I have, really quick, let me jump into this really quick, was I thought Tasha, in my opinion, fixed a few things. Yeah, it was kind of heavy-handed, but it fixed, like, the Ranger. Because the Ranger was trash. From the core. I mean, from the first book, it was just trash. Where they tried to fix it in Sword Coast, but that was a flop. Where Tasha fixed a few things. And that's just, I mean, D&D has been heavy-handed since 3.0. And Pathfinder was no different. They were heavy-handed until, I don't know that much about second edition, so I won't speak of it. But it's just, I don't think Tasha was really where they, I don't want to say crap the bed or mess the carpet, depends on what terminology you want to use. But if you want to say the, the Gloomstalker Fixed Ranger, you're absolutely right, Dark Knight. I'm trying to think what book for 5e that really did shit the bed.
I mean, the Gloomstalker was in Xanathar's, wasn't it?
I thought it was in Tasha. I could be wrong. I mean, I very well could be wrong, and that's fine. I'm used to it. I hear it all the time from my ex-wife. No, it was when they brought in Magic the Gathering into 5e, I thought that was a bit much. I thought there was no need for that. But, like most things, what the hell do I know?
It's money. That's down to money. But
it's also other campaign settings. I mean, it's just like with second edition, throwing out a new campaign setting every 5 minutes. I just saw it as more options to play the game, and cross promotion, cross marketing. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm always pulling stuff in from other settings into D&D, anyways. So it didn't seem too foreign of a concept.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I want to play D&D, not I want to play D&D, not Rummy. If you get my reference.
I'm just going to bring up Larissa's comment here. Once you have to throw out your old player characters and create new ones is the point at which your game revision has broken the game. I've mentioned it on the stream before that I joined when I first came back to the hobby around 2011, 2012. I joined a game. It was a Dragonlance World game. It started in second edition, and the DM had switched across to Castles and Crusades because he had a guy in the group who was moaning all the time about playing second edition AD&D, purely because it was an old system, and he was the sort of person who believed if it was new, then it was better. And he wanted to play something new. So the compromise was Castles and Crusades because it hadn't long been out at that point. And, certainly that version hadn't. And it was newer than second edition, so he was okay with that. So I had this Castles and Crusades cleric that I was playing. it was perfectly viable, and I'd created him and developed him in the way I wanted to role play him based on. I picked options based on his deity. Everything sort of fitted in terms of what abilities I'd chosen and the spells I was using based on the deity. And then he found out that Castles and Crusades, because we're playing Dragonlance and we really wanted to have dragons in there, there was certain parts of the Castles and Crusades mechanics that made it really difficult for him to bring in the dragons that he wanted for us to have any chance, because of the way the saving throw system worked. And we were only a small group. We only had 3 or 4 players. And he switched us over to 3rd edition. And we redid our characters. And I did mine purely based on how I'd role-played the character, his personality, the spells he was using, and his deity. And that character immediately became unviable. That character immediately became useless. And that, to me, was just a sign that the game was totally different. My character, I basically had to completely redesign him from the bottom up to make him viable, and I didn't want to do that. CDK is waiting to join in. I haven't paid for StreamYard, so I'm on a limit of 6. So
right, I'll ditch out.
Are you sure I'll pay?
Yeah, I got other stuff I need to really focus on.
I can go because I'm just
nice meeting you.
Later.
I'm just listening tonight as well. So, he's gone.
Right. Two people willing to jump out to let DK in. Oh, okay. DK, you better have something interesting to say. Hello, DK.
Hi.
Okay,
I feel really bad now.
Why?
I don't know. I just wanted to listen to the stream and people left.
Don't worry.
Well, say your piece, but I just want to go back up to another comment that was made a little bit earlier. Where is it? I think L made it. I think it was L. And I'm going to say here, this was it. L said that he disagreed. New editions are written to resell the entire game again. That's what it has become with D&D. But I think in the past, it wasn't always the case. There have been a lot of instances in the past where, as people have said, that 1st edition proved to be a little bit too cumbersome. And they've realized that the 1st edition rules, maybe the way they were written, the way they were designed, were just getting in the way. So quite often, a 2nd edition was necessary in order just to smooth things out. Not quite in the way that 2nd edition did, when it took a lot of the flavor out of the writing. But I'm going to say here, going back to Paranoia. 1st edition, Paranoia is a game where if you let the mechanics get in the way of the game, it completely spoils it. It is the most extreme silliness where you just want people in character just being daft. And if the DM has to refer to charts and tables and mechanics, they start getting a bit crunchy, then you just lose it a bit. But 2nd edition absolutely made it a better game. It was absolutely necessary. It absolutely dialed down any crunch that was in the game and allowed it to flow without taking any of the heart and soul out of the game.
Well, plus by 2nd edition, a lot more playtesting has been done.
Yes.
Everyone's got feedback. If a small company has survived to make a 3rd edition of anything, there's a chance that it's no longer a business in a basement. It's become a small or medium-sized business, and then there's different considerations to how to run a business where as opposed to decisions as a gamer. And I don't disagree at all. I kind of agree with L's comment, and the problem seems to be getting slightly more distortion. Although that's a bit of a, I don't want to, say bad things about later editions, but they are running businesses, and there's lots of considerations that they need to. It's not just gaming decisions that they have.
It is true. Yeah, of course. I mean, and we have brought that up a few times. It's corporate decisions. They've got shareholders they've got to keep happy. But going back 30 or 40 years, it wasn't always that. I mean, I do think that I've said it multiple times in this stream. I think Chaosium have got it right with Call of Cthulhu. Everything stays compatible.
But I think there's one big advantage with Call of Cthulhu was, and you'll see this in the newer ones, a lot of them are freelancers, so you're only really supporting 2 or 3 people. And I believe Peterson, and I could be wrong on this, also acts he also does, I want to say, like side jobs in video games and everything else based on Call of Cthulhu. So that really allows him that's not his primary source of income or supporting a lot of people. The problem that I have with some of it is, and I'm not going to knock, I liked first edition a lot because I felt that every hardback that came out was valuable to my game. Now, I can argue about Unearthed Arcana, but Oriental Adventures I thought was a great supplement book. I like the Wilderness Survival.
Yep.
That was the way I felt about it. Now, did I have to put everything in there? No, but it actually opened up ideas of how do I incorporate certain things. Like I says, a lot of times I look at like the mechanics side of, oh, we have pyroclastic flows, we can do this. Oh, we have tsunamis, we have this. Manual of the Plains I thought was fantastic for encouraging people to really create something new. The Greyhawk book, Dragonlance, but I didn't feel like they were, how do I want to put it? I loved the Greyhawk box set. The hardback, I was mixed on it. It was just, I much preferred having the large maps and everything else. I thought the box set was a better.
No, it's a great set.
But I'm not against those hardbacks. I thought that they were actually trying to expand the game and make it interesting and everything else. The problem that I have with 2E wasn't necessarily that they were expanding. The problem is that the quality of the books went way down very quickly. And
that is true.
That's the problem I have with a lot of it. Now, I didn't mind as much for some of the old Warhammer, or we expanding things. And the first edition Forgotten Realms, I thought, did a good job. Here, we'll take a certain part of the world, we'll expand it with the map, and give you more details. I felt I was getting a value-added product, not a, here, we'll throw it against the wall, and you have to deal with the map that we created. And that's the problem I have with whether it's 5E or 2E within a couple of years, is that's what it really felt like, is I had to play catch up. Oh, I have to get this book. It's like Pokemon. I have to collect them all. And I have a collector's mentality. And am I getting a better book, or am I just making my life more complicated? I feel the earlier editions were not making my life more complicated. It was stuff I feel like I could add, but I wasn't missing anything by leaving it out. And I think that's where we're having problems with the newer systems.
I just want to come to Elle's comment here about the basic and advanced split. Yes, it was 2 different lines, and basic was generally aimed at the youngsters. Frank Mentzer admitted that, but it was also in the late 70s. It was Gygax trying to avoid paying Arneson royalties. That's one of the reasons.
So that's a business decision, rightly or wrongly, which we're all aware of, but we're here primarily as gamers. So I don't agree with the bit about kiddie D&D versus adult. And on the other hand, sometimes kids are better at imagination, and this is a game about
and
imagination. It's us adults that like to argue about the rules, but the rules are what, compatibility is what we were playing a game tonight. Compatibility is what we agreed tonight. And as long as the DM says this is how we do initiative, this is how we'll be doing critical hits tonight, and a few, that is the compatibility.
It's just the fact that that's the whole point of BX. To be honest, that's the whole I'd say majesty of that system. It's a lot of people, like, on our server would say that, oh, it's an incomplete game, it's for babies. But like, the cool thing about it is, yes, it's an incomplete game because you're supposed to make it your own. Like
Yeah.
it's like you're saying, but kids are more imaginative. Yeah, the reason why adults prefer codified rules is because their brains have calcified. They
Good point.
don't retain.
Pretty-
They don't retain information like children do, or they're not as energetic, and I'm not trying to be mean, but they're also like a little more cynical, or at least more pragmatic than children are. Children have a wonder and they want to learn things. It's why they
You made
constantly
two
ask their
really good
parents
points.
questions.
You
So-
made two really, really good points. I want to comment real quick before I forget them because I'm getting old.
I'll go for it. I'll go for it.
You are in fact supposed to make it your own. That was the great thing about the old days is you were supposed to make it your own. And I know new versions say, throw out what you want, but the players come in with the attitude, this is the rules, this is what I'm going to use, and this is how we're going to play. And yeah, I'm not okay with that. And yeah, kids, they learn things, quicker and faster. That's why we stop going to college when we get to a certain age. We're done. We think we're ready and we go out and we're full up, like my brain's getting full up. I don't know how much more I can learn before I start forgetting things like math and sports. I've only got so much, room in this computer up here. And, I just wanted to let you know those were really good points that I live with on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting though is I think we also have to look at it this way: from that we're older and we do have probably 40 years of experience each, or very close. I don't know about you, DK, but a lot of us have been playing since the 1980s. We could go back and look at these, and one is we're trying to recapture some of our youth. I mean, there's always that aspect into it, but the other part is we can also look back.
I will say that DK is an old man in a young man's body.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's part of the reason that we try to bring our kids into these hobbies is we want them to have the same magic that we had when we were kids, normally. But the other part that comes down to it, I think, is that we can also take a step back and say, what are better games? Because I can look back literally and tell you that, in my opinion, Basic is a superior game to play. But my 14-year-old self believed that complexity and chart and to a more simulationist made a better game. As I get older, I'm like, no, let's just move forward. It's the story that matters, not all of these rules. And I think that's where we are coming from here. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just. I don't know. I don't understand. I think it's just a huge. I think the reason why there's such a backlash to BX is just because when people play it, they tend to be more abstract and kind of loosey goosey with the rules, and that has in a way allowed for like story gamers and a lot of the kind of people who we would consider ruining the hobby. And it's like almost like an extreme conservative movement of hyper traditionalism, and it's I don't know. It's just not fun. Just like at the end of the day, my philosophy has always been: we're playing a game about imaginary elves fighting dragons in space. What does it matter what rules we use? Let's just have fun. It's not that fucking hard.
And I think do the rules encourage that aspect, or do they take away from that aspect? Is what I'm really trying to talk about.
Too many rules actually will, I think, inevitably take away from that.
Exactly.
Amen.
And that's why I feel like as I get older, I gravitate towards the storyteller system. I gravitate towards the free league year zero, the 2D20 system, because I, as a GM, can just do it on the fly very quickly. I'm not sitting there arguing rules. The players have to just accept it. They have very simple rules to understand. Well, how many dice do I roll? You know what? Take off 3 dice because it's really difficult, but it's just to add your skill plus your stat. All right. How many successes did you get? Go. Okay. We all have the same game. Makes it very easy to run from that aspect. It's very different when you go in D&D like, which mainly they tried fixing with the advantage and disadvantage, but then they put all these other modifiers on top of it. Well, if it's this, it's +1. If it's this, it's -2. Then you have this. This is +3. Well, and you go through all the lists. You're going, oh God! And then it's even worse when you have players that like to cheat, because now you have to find out on what they're doing to make sure that their bonuses are correct. And that's why I said, no, I like dice pool systems. We'll do it real fast and we're done. So anyway.
Oh, sorry. I think my internet kind of lagged out there for a sec. Sorry. No, I was just saying. I think there's more important things to be worried about than what's the bonus to hit on my sword against the drow. It just doesn't really matter, to be honest.
Well,
I don't really care. Like, I've gotten to the stage where I'm like if like in my sci-fi game, if my players have trained in, say, driving planes or say spaceships, or they have a background in it, I'm just like, you don't even need to roll. Rolling is for 0-level scrubs. They're the ones who fail. This is a pulp adventure game. You are competent enough that this will never happen. You will only fail in combat, but you don't need to make a check to activate the fucking car. I don't care. You step in, you do the thing, and we're off.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at everyone talking about, oh, it's this. Look, I haven't dealt with these players in real life. You know, Twitter's not real life. We all talk about that. But I do have to deal with players in real life. And when we talk about calcification, you know, if it's something's easy to learn, people will get into it. If it's hard to learn, it's hard to break that threshold. And, you know, the idea of whenever you bring new additions, you do need to bring in new players. Your old players have bought everything. And either they're going to go to a new game, which, I mean, you know, I think Shadow has some of this, but I'm probably worse in some ways. You know, Shadow's collecting all the old stuff. Every time I'm like, ooh, where's the new shiny thing? Let me go grab that. And, you know, I'm like, because I really, regardless of what we say about old editions and new editions, I think that we live in a great time for role-playing games. I can pick stuff from 40 years ago. I can pick stuff from now. You know, I haven't played Traveler. I looked at Traveler for the new stuff by Mongoose. It's super easy, but listening to Shauna talk about the original, it sounds like a horrific nightmare. And anyone that remembers, what was it, Rules Law, Claw Law, and everything else, that sounds horrible to me. But MERP sounds not as bad, you know, so we have to go through that.
Yeah, believe it or not, Old Traveler is not that much different.
Okay.
It really, I mean, it's got some differences. I'm not going to lie. And getting the core rule book for Traveler is you know, it's a much better book. But playing Old Traveler was still, for me, was a hell of a lot of fun. But it was, as always, it's the people, it's the spirit of the game. You know, the whole combined effort of the players and the referee all combining to make one, you know, great story.
I'm just going to come to my own experience here with along the lines of what Lionel says. One of my groups, we met through because I've told this story before on the stream. A local shop asked me if I could run a game for a group of guys who wanted to play with an experienced DM. They'd been playing little bits and pieces, and some of them had tried DMing, and a couple of them were brand new. And he asked me to start running a game for them, and it was 5th edition. And when we started off playing, those first 4 or 5 sessions, when they were all first or second level, were brilliant. Low level, not too many mechanics getting in the way, because that low level 5th edition for me is absolutely fine. And they were incredibly creative. But then as the game went on and they got more mechanics relating to their characters, as their characters gained power, creativity waned because they were relying on the character sheet more. And eventually, when that campaign ended, I took them back to 1st edition AD&D, and all the creativity came flooding back again, because of the simplicity of AD&D at its roots. They didn't have the list of skills to rely on. They didn't have the list of powers to rely on. And it brought creativity back into the campaign. And the game was all the better for it. And people have been saying, people in chat, new versions of the game can often bolt on new rules, more rules. I know certainly going from first to second edition, most games they do tend to tidy things up and make things easier. But then as editions go on from that, quite often you get more rules and more revisions, and it tends to build in more and more. Certainly with D&D, more as each edition goes on, more and more options get bolted in, and people say, "Oh, it allows us to be more creative." No, it does the opposite.
It would be a courageous company that turned around and said, "Well, the sixth edition of anything is going to be a lot like the first edition because we acknowledge we've overdone it." That wouldn't be a commercially wise thing to say, even whether it's true or not.
I think, when we're looking at it, I think this was the advantage of, if you look at how well BX or Beckney actually sold, I believe it outsold first and second edition combined, or very close. And people, now I'm not saying maybe overall money wise, but it seemed like the core books it sold more, or the core supplements. I think what's interesting though is when you got basic, oh well, it's only good to third level. Well, that's fine, but once you get up to ready for fourth level, you buy expert. Okay, you're expanding the game. But if you didn't like the game, you didn't feel like you were in for a lot of money either. And
true.
Now you end up expert. Okay, I like expert. Well, let's go to the next one, which was what, companion. And I never got those books, but expert was more than enough for me to go so far. But even very popular games, they still bring out new editions or new rules or anything else. So whenever we're talking about this, I mean, how many editions of Catan do we have? How many editions of Monopoly or whatever? And they relate to IP, and some of them are more fun than others. But I'll tell you this much: I'm never playing Monopoly in my life. I hate it. And there's other games like that as well. And there are some games I really enjoyed, but they were either licensed or they're just not being produced anymore. And so we have to go collect that. I know Shadow and stuff probably remembers the old Starship Troopers from Avalon Hill.
I got a copy on my shelf.
I liked it. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure if my father still has it, but I enjoyed that. I liked having the hex paper and everything. But we're never going to see that game again, and that's unfortunate from that aspect. So I look, if they're making money, good for them. They can't produce the same thing. Either they have to do new stuff. You always have to bring out something new. You have to do a refresh whatever's there. Are you improving the game or not? My biggest problem is that the quality goes down after a certain number of supplements. And
yes.
The other part is how much playtesting went into it. If they do one D&D and it has better playtesting, dealing with a lot of the issues that you have in 5e, then I might look into it. But if it's not, I'm just going to say toss it. But there are going to be other players who go, well, I can't do all the super cool, overpowered stuff. I'm never going to play that again. Well, that's how I felt about basic and advanced. But now I look back in history and I go, I would rather play basic. I bought OSE and then I bought advanced fantasy. That's as complicated as I wanted to get. I don't want all the stuff in the DMG from the first edition, which has tons and tons of. I mean, whether people realize or not, what was that 8-point font? It's one of the thickest books out there with super small font. I think it's a fantastic book for DMs to read, but I don't want to play with all those rules ever.
Osric is better.
Osric's great, but one of the keys with that first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, though, is you didn't need to play with all the rules because it
said not to.
Yeah.
One of the last things in the book is the afterword, which I'm going to have tattooed on my arm someday. Was
but Gygax when? Because that totally doesn't concede the whole fucking point that Gygax said that in every single edition of the fucking game that he ever released. including chainmail, bro SR.
Yeah,
It's
that afterward sums up first edition for me.
yeah, but it literally they would argue, oh, but that just means you're supposed to use all the rules in the book. But if there are gaps that are left over, well, if it's the perfect version of D&D, it should have no gaps now, shouldn't it?
Yeah, all these games should have that written in it. Use what you want. Don't use what you don't want, because people are going to do that anyways. We all know that.
Yeah.
How many times have we dropped out a rule? And yeah, sure, Gygax went back and recanted that statement, but that was after he went through his cocaine and hooker phase in Hollywood, trying to make a movie, and realized that, hey, I can't say this because I need to make more money so I can pay for more cocaine
Get
and hookers.
blackjacks and hookers, yeah. Get blackjacks and hookers, like that.
And it was counterintuitive to selling more product, which is what he was trying to do eventually. In the beginning, though, that came from his heart, and that's what he meant, and that's what I'm going to go with. I know I get tons of crap for mentioning it all the time, but as far as I know, there are new books that come out saying the same thing. It's story and setting that should come first, not these encyclopedic volumes of rules that everybody has to now memorize and use like scripture. I'm going to use whatever I want, and everybody else can do what they want. I wanted to mention something again before I forgot, though. With playtesting, Omen, playtesting to me is like polling, before and after an election. If you poll the right people, you're going to get the answers you want. And right now, with the current environment, I guarantee they're not going to play test these games with people like you or me. They're going to find people who've never played before and are just honored to be in the playtest group and go, oh, this is the best thing ever. Of course they're going to say that. They're not going to find a bunch of old farts like us to come in and critique and playtest a game that they don't want to hear a single negative thing about. They're not going to change anything based on playtesting. If they do change anything, it's going to be because their finite inner circle, their star chamber, has decided to do so. Not what Timmy down the street thinks of a game he's never played before.
Shadow, I'm not disagreeing with you. Now, again, I said if it turns out better, but this is why I'm not, unlike when I was a kid and I was looking for the newest and greatest thing. I didn't buy 5e until it was out like 4 years or so. I mean, you look at some of these things that are coming out, and even then I'm very discriminatory on what I buy, unless it's a really good game. If it's a really good game, I'll go all in. But even then, like I have almost all the Conan books. I love the Conan books. I know you don't. But I tell people that get into it, and I know I've told John this. These are the 3 books you need. If you can buy anything else, it's because you want it. You want that's up to you. But I can't. And that's where we have to be discriminate on what's good to buy and what is not. I'm not saying that the other products are bad. I just can't say you can get your value for your money unless it's something you really, really want. And that's the way I feel about a lot of these games for first or second edition. Was everyone thinks, especially if you're a DM nowadays, and they know that they're selling towards players. I don't know how it was for you, but when I was growing up, almost all of us wanted all the books because at some point we figured we were going to be dungeon masters at some point in the next year. So we bought everything. And that's different than with the players nowadays who, when you can tell that they're only selling to players for the most part. The DM stuff is, they complain they aren't getting enough DM, but they're not giving them the good advice. The Dungeon Master's Guide for 5e, I think, is actually an excellent book for getting this in there. But they are not doing this they're not putting out a Dungeon Master's Guide 2 or something of that sort. That's what I'm finding is disappointing. So, now if you're the DM, now I have to deal with all these, and a lot of them are young. And to be fair, since we're in our 40s, a lot of these newer players are literally young enough to be our children. We have to look at them, and we treat them almost like children. They get mad because they're rebellious. They're at that age, like, I know better than everything. Okay, fine. Come back. I mean,
DK's young enough to be our child.
I mean, if you know, literally, if you are under 30, you're old enough that I could have had, you could be my, son or daughter. I mean,
If you're under 40, you could be my child.
well, yeah, maybe for you, Shadow. But
Well, I started young. It's not because I'm 55.
okay. Anyway, but I mean, that's the whole point of this is you're looking at it and say, okay, it's just like everyone talks about on how they would raise their children, and then they come back a few years later and they go, well, mom, dad, you were right. Not all parents, but a lot of times if you have good parents, you come back with your, with your hat in hand and go, mom and dad, you did the right thing. I hated it at the time. And that's where we are in the game. And that's why I don't worry too much about a lot of these. But that also doesn't mean that we're always right. At the end of the day, they have to find out on their own and what they like. And, that's why I don't mind new additions. Everyone says, well, it's planned. I know you say this about planned obsolescence. I'm okay with it. I just wish that the additions were either completely different. Like, to be fair, 2E versus 3E, it's a completely different game. Now I can't really compare the two. I'm not trying to reference back to all the stuff back there, or 3 versus 5. But am I getting a better game is what I'm really asking. And that's the stuff that we went through for the additions between 2 and 3, these new players are going to go through. And you can tell even the influencers are pushing back against 1D&D because this is their little safety net that they've been playing for 5 to 8 years. This is what they become accustomed to. And now you're going to shake it up. And
that is the crux. Is the new edition a better game?
Yeah.
See, for me, I look at it completely different. It's the players. The players make the game better. I mean, how many times have we played a game that's not a role-playing game, and we had a night that we'll never forget because we left with our sides aching from laughing so much, from having a good time with good friends, even new good friends, compared to playing the best game ever with a bunch of people who just didn't click.
That is true. And obviously, yes, the group makes the game, and even a poor rule set can be a lot of fun if everyone is in the right mood for it. I've had sessions where I've come away thinking, that wasn't so good. And I've had other sessions where I've played games I don't particularly like, but the people there have been great because they're friends, and we've sat around a table having a beer or whatever, and enjoying it. But I do want to. I mean, part of the point of this chat tonight is regarding the games themselves, and I think with every edition, apart from Call of Cthulhu, of the ones that I've mentioned, there have been certain editions that we can pick out and say that was a mistake, where new isn't always better. Paranoia, 3rd edition, or 5th edition as they called it, it's been disowned by everyone who ever played Paranoia because it was so bad. Star Wars 5th edition took out the key fun of the game, which was designing your own car. It gave you default cars and no mechanics to design them. And I would say, in terms of D&D, even though it probably wasn't a bad game in itself, 4th edition didn't feel like D&D because they tried to change things too much. If they'd have marketed it as Dungeons and Dragons Tactics and not as a role-playing game, then it would have done absolutely fine. It wouldn't have had the kickback that it got. But it's because they marketed it as the new version of the new way to play D&D. That's why people kicked back. So it has to go down as a bad version because it didn't feel like D&D. So not every game has had its successes all the way through. New hasn't always meant good. new hasn't always meant improvement. And a lot of companies have made mistakes along the way.
Innovation for innovation's sake will always lead to failed design.
Yep.
Well,
Sometimes there's no need to reinvent the wheel, boys. Just stick with what you got.
Well, and while we talk about new editions, there's lots of other games too. Just because I don't like a particular game doesn't mean, like you said, with the people. If I like the people, we'll probably pick a game that we enjoy, regardless of what goes on. And there's always someone that wants to try something new. Usually that's me. But people who don't want to try something new, that's where it can get kind of hard. But once they get in there, they may like it, they may not. But I don't. Yeah, I'm trying to think are there better games out there for editions? I know that Shauna likes the newer Traveler. I never played the old Traveler, and when I mean old Traveler, I mean I guess it's the one from the 1970s. But the current mechanic is really easy to use, and that's what really always turned me off of Traveler was the artwork. That was
it was unappealing. The books didn't jump off the shelves to you, did they?
No, it was very dry, and the artwork was very reminiscent of a sci-fi version of AD&D, first edition kind of artwork. Occasionally, you got some good stuff, but it survived all these years for a reason, because it went, it was a more or less a generic choose your own setting kind of sci-fi game, and there wouldn't be Mongoose without it. And Mongoose, put out their second edition is a tour de force. It's an incredible game based mostly on the original rules. The things they changed, fixed it. And Sean and I are pretty good friends, I guess. And he's more interested in the immersion and role playing with as few numbers spouted during the game as possible, trying to make the game like a 4-hour movie. And I applaud him for that, because that's kind of how we all sort of envision an ideal game. But unfortunately, those players are only 1% of the population of role players, or people who call themselves role players. It takes a lot of work or a lot of discipline to stay in that kind of a frame of mind. And it's not always possible with some people in some games. And I'm not going to kick out my best friends because they ask me a question, or they forget a rule, or they've had a couple of beers too many that night and do something. These are my friends for decades, and every table is going to be different. But most of these games that we're talking about have survived for one reason or another. And I think we should kind of focus on what was great about the game to begin with.
I'm going to bring up another little thing that while we're talking about first and second edition, let's not forget about the artwork and the change between first edition artwork and second edition artwork.
That's what money brings you. More money for the art budget.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look at the, we're always looking at systems, but boy, when you look at the flash look at the first edition player's handbook, and now go look at the second edition where they have full color spreads and things of that sort. You can tell they really upgraded the quality for the artwork. And that also is a big factor. I know that is for me. As I get older, there's tons of rule sets, but I want artwork that draws me into the world. Just like you were talking about settings more than systems. I want systems that support the setting and the general feel. Oh,
cheers, DK.
Okay. But I mean, whether regardless of which version you look at, the artwork has generally been getting better and better. But here's something I've noticed, and I know it's an age thing. The artwork for 5e has been getting worse and worse, it seems, over time. The newer books are getting worse than the older ones for the type of art that I like. It doesn't seem to take the same technical level to do the artwork that it did in second or third or even in the earlier part of fifth.
I still like, I get a kick out of the old, sort of comical, humorous takes some of the artwork had in the original first edition. Some of the woodcuts that were in it also were really, really good. And it was a different time, and a different budget. And if you took out all of the art out of both editions, would it make a difference if we never, as a species, put artwork into books? Would the game still? Yeah, exactly. That is a classic picture that epitomizes Dungeons and Dragons, aptly put right next to the treasure table. To this day, that picture says it all. You could color it and have somebody else repaint it, but that, for me, encapsulates everything about D&D that I loved. The hard-earned opening of that final treasure chest, the here's your reward kind of thing. Great artwork is it's art. It's a wonder and a beauty to behold, but sometimes it's missing some soul. The person who drew that picture that you just showed, he was there. He knows what that feeling is like. Some of these other artists, just make up art, and someone just goes, "Okay, I'll buy that for this page."
Yeah.
That particular.
That was by Dave Trampier, that piece of work, and his artwork. While it might not be of the technical excellence of the likes of EC or Elmore. I mean, Elmore's art in the basic D&D set, his black and white art in those basic books was just sublime. But Trampier had that certain something in his art that gave it character, real character, and as you say, it epitomized the game. It was so apt for the game. Here's one of the halflings and the dwarfs on the stairs at the back of the player's handbook, with the eyes in the darkness and the magic mouth on the wall. Is beautiful. Some of his images in the original monster manual, that Rakshasa with its backward thumbs, puffing away on a pipe. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, some of that early art is so basic. It makes it really evocative, and you have to do a bit of work with the imagination. Whereas later art, I think that's good as well. But the colours are better. You could say, well, it's technically better, but you don't quite have to work so hard in order to imagine yourself in that adventure. And that's why we have art in these books. It's it's to place a player in the adventure.
I don't know about you guys, but when I was growing up playing AD&D, the original version, that artwork often was inspirational for artists I knew and grew up with. They're like, you know what, I can do that. I'm going to try. And of course, they probably went on to eventually do better and pursue a career in art and start working with colors and things like that as they got older, etc. But for the really young players, the 13, the 14, the 18-year-olds, they looked at that and they went, I can do that. All I need is a pencil. You know what I mean? I don't need to spend any money. I can just grab a pencil or a pen and I can do that. And growing up, it was so much fun to see my fellow gamers and friends try to do that instead of look at, a better piece of artwork and go, I could never do that.
I still make I still make fun of the beholder because it looks like
Cthulhu 7th edition art.
I think that's excellent. I mean,
it's beautiful,
phenomenal.
But see, to me,
hey, Oman, real quick, you okay? Catching a cold or somebody?
I am having very bad allergies.
Okay. Sorry, buddy.
What's coming in. Well, yeah. Well, you know what? You have to live with it. Yeah, but this is what, when I look at it, Theme Folio still has that same end because it's so dark. It still has that thing of, ooh, I'm opening up the Theme Folio to find monsters. You can really feel that it has this feeling on there. I think the artwork was good. I love the artwork in the deities and demigods. I don't just because they had breasts everywhere. But when you look at that and you look at the editions, I think that
Hey, nothing wrong with that, man.
I know, but I'm laughing. But I'm saying, but the artwork I thought was somewhat inspirational. Even the old Dragon magazine stuff, and that's what I really love about. As we've moved through, the quality has moved up, and I think that has helped out our game. But now, I mean, this sounds terrible. If you have bad art, now I'll OSE is a little bit different because I do like that kind of feel where it's cartoonish, like you said, where it looks like someone did a little pencil art, and I'm like, oh, okay, I can. But that's kind of where I feel about it. But some of this other stuff, if you don't have good artwork, I'm not going to buy your role playing game, no matter how good it is, because to me, the book is as important as I have to enjoy reading it. It has to be a visual stimulus. There's so much in there, and I think that sometimes when we look at these editions, I can't look through them at just rose-colored glasses. I have to laugh at them as much as anything else. When I look at the old Beholder, which looks like a what is that called? The little styrofoam ball where they put in pipe cleaners, and someone drew a face on it. That's what the old Beholder looks like. I don't know if John has the old monster manual. We can show it up the Beholder.
I do up here. Just want to mention L's first experience of one of my videos was my review of Monster Manual 2, and he encountered my unwillingness to accept artwork that doesn't feel relevant to the book itself. Yeah, I've actually coloured in. There is a little bit of colouring in the art.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at it, that is literally, that looks like I put a googly eye on the old mothball, and then I stuck some pipe cleaners in there. I mean,
this shows 13-year-old me, the Maralith. Oh, look what I've coloured in. Her hair and her nipples. That's why 13.
I will say this much is.
Hey, you guys understand though that some of those images are why they had to make a second edition in their minds.
Yeah.
Isn't that weak? Isn't that just weak compared to what we live with now?
A whole module got cancelled, didn't it? The green module versus the orange module.
Palace of the Silver Princess.
It literally got pulled and thrown in the bin, I believe.
The story is that was due to the art, but I think there was a little bit more to it. I think it's to do with getting a few wires crossed in the production of it, and the adventure not quite having the. If you look at that original orange edition, it was available as a free PDF for a while, and I've got it. The level of production on it was a massive downgrade in terms of how professional it looked compared to previous adventures. And I don't know whether it was to do with what Jean Wells was told of how to produce it, what she was trying to create, but also there was a tone to it that didn't really match what they were trying to push with BX at the time. So I think there was more to it than just those two infamous images.
Yeah.
Anyhow. Looks like people are bickering in chat.
Well, I think the problem really is this: what I think Elfbait are coming from is what is Twitter versus what is the real world. Mostly, I found that if people who want to play games, and as long as you're not a complete jerk, they're happy to have you. Now, I know some people that doesn't happen to everyone, but the problem is that the loud ones are the ones that are dominating the discussion. And, but in many ways, I feel these aren't people that are playing. You can tell that, and a lot of them are journalists. They get it for the clickbait. They're more worried about clickbait. And if you aren't discussing it, they aren't making money. And but even for games, I want to play a game. You want to play a game. We'll have a discussion of what it's acceptable and what it's not.
And look at what we've had on the stream tonight. Shadow, I believe, is older than the rest of us. I don't know how old Graham is. He's never told me. Shadow's older than me or you, Omanal. DK is in his 20s. I'm in Britain. We often have Saxius on, who's a Dane who lives in Britain, who's a lot younger than me. We've got different backgrounds. I know you're ex-military. I know Shadow's very religious. I know we are different. We are, and all that matters is, do we enjoy games? And are we respectful when we play our games with the other people at the table?
You know, and the only time I had really, and this comes down to it, is there is a maturity level. You know, I have played with people that are like my coworker's son. She was playing with us, and there is a certain maturity level where, you know, as we get older, it's like, look, we're here to play a game. Let's get the story going. Don't be a jerk. You know, and it's like little tiny things of, well, I'll show I'm more powerful. I'll throw off the adventure. You know, everyone talks about railroads. Well, look, there are kind of tracks where you're allowed to play within the lines. You know, we don't color on a different sheet of paper. Stay within the piece of paper, but you can alter certain things in there, and that's what I really want. Is there is a framework within it, but most of us know this. Okay, if we're supposed to go investigate this murder, I'm not saying go halfway through it. No, you know what? I'm tired of this. We can go do something else. And the game, you know, that's a jerk to the game master.
Yeah.
No, we understand that there is some things in there, but we also don't want to say, oh, I can't make a decision where, you know, you have to do this. It's like, well, wait a minute. Do I even put this section in there? If I tell players that they could be on a caravan, and for some reason they don't want to go on the caravan, and then I just force them somehow. If I'm doing that, then why don't I just start the adventure? You wake up in a caravan. Boom, you're there. We'll move forward from that point. You know, I don't. That's, you know, but that's an age thing. I think many times is us learning that I'm not going to fight you over the rules. You make a decision. We'll talk about it after if I don't like it. If I really don't like it, then I'll just say, you know what, this game isn't for me, and I'll drop out. That's the mature point. I don't have to sit there and fight for 40 minutes like I used to when I was 14. I'm not 14 anymore.
I know Elfbait has made this point. The vast majority, we just hear the voices from those who shout. The vast majority of people are respectful. And I know we get, for most of us, for a lot of us, we get more respectful as we get older. It is part of maturity. But I've played games with younger people who are just as respectful. I've played most of my group are 20 odd years younger than me, and we have a great time at the table. And it's someone's done.
That's Shadow.
Shadows, yes. I've just muted Shadow. Just yeah. Let me know when he's shush. But we hear what we see online in terms of all this hate, clickbait, and all that sort of stuff. A lot of it is just to drive clicks and just to troll other people and just to stir up. And I don't think a lot of these people that say all this nonsense would say the same to you when talking to your face. People are emboldened when they're behind it, but with a keyboard and a screen.
Well, the online personality is not the person that you meet, and you know, let's say people are, if they're in person gaming, they're more likely to play games with people that they kind of like or at least get on with, as well as it's kind of usually more than, oh, we agree on a specific rule set. So we're kind of cherry picking what games we play with who anyway. Yeah.
Anyhow, I think we've done the topic to death. Anyway.
Well, you know what is here's a question for you, John. I know you've only played a few of them. Which version of Call of Cthulhu have you liked the best for the edition?
Me,
Yeah,
7th edition.
Okay.
As was said earlier, removing the resistance table is great. I like the luck mechanic because it does allow the players to have a little bit more input mechanically. And when people may have noticed, there were some people in chat. Mage's Musings are now. Hello, AB. Nice to see you. And General Nut. I'm often reminding people when I'm running a game online of Call of Cthulhu that they do have luck to use, because I'd like to see them expend it and succeed. And of course, the luck spiral. I call for a lot of luck in the game, and if they've spent their luck, they're more likely to fail later on when things get much more interesting. But I am going to say now, I think of all games that I run, Call of Cthulhu is probably the one I'm strongest at running. The mechanics are so simple that they just don't get in the way. And I love, when I'm running a game, I love to shove mechanics into the background and not have them getting in the way. I don't know if you've noticed, Graham, when we run first edition, I'm pushing a lot of mechanics.
But on the other hand, because I was thinking this earlier, now you mentioned it, I can't remember your exact words from earlier, but it was something like I veered away from the rules or words to that effect. But the thing is, I didn't notice at the time because, you know, if the story's good, the adventure's good, then you're not gonna care, and that's, you know, gets back to some of the things we were talking about regarding imagination. And I want to refer to this. There's an argument in the chat about art versus AI versus imagination, and I side on the imagination side on that, on a particular argument like that. I think AI can produce art that's technically better, but there's a reference to a mermaid somewhere in the chat. Well, somebody originally would have to conceive of a mermaid, think of a mermaid, and then somebody else comes along that's technically a better artist and produces a better image of a mermaid. So that's where that argument sits with myself.
Yeah, General Nut, my first
character. But there you go.
General Nut says his first character saved most or all of his 70 points of luck. How did that work out? Yeah. Yeah, think Alien.
That's like trust the DM. I mean, it's got to be fun for the DM as well, rather than being a rules lawyer. If it's good for the story, then it's as long as nobody's contravening the rules, then for me it just adds to the story and the drama.
Trust is huge in this game, and more so than any game I can actually think of. You have to have absolute mutual trust in everybody. I mean, I know we're not gambling for high stakes or anything like that, but time is a finite resource, and spending it with people you don't trust is a no-win situation. Eventually, we have to have it, and it's got to be both ways. You have to trust your GM, you have to trust your players. And if you have that, you walk away with something that will last forever.
We did a stream on what makes a good player a while back, and my number one point in that is the first thing in order to be a good player is you have to trust the DM to run the game from the get-go. The player has to come into the game with the idea that the DM is here to give us a good time. If you don't come into the game with that mindset, it's not going to work. It's not going to work at all.
I also think, to be fair, that's what everyone needs to have certain expectations. Certain games are much more dangerous than others. If you're going to play DCC and you're going to do a funnel, expect characters to die left and right. If you're going to be playing Alien, expect your characters to die left and right. If you're going to be playing, I think of Pugmire, but that's not fair because you can die in that one too. If you're going to play a game where the expectation is that you're probably, what is it, Tales from the Loop, where you're not supposed to die, there's certain expectations. I don't expect if I'm playing Tales from the Loop to suddenly have my, child get eaten by an alien. Okay, you have broken the convention that we're all there. And I think as much as people want to talk about X cards in session 0, well, you set that expectation at the beginning, and we have formal names for things that we as kids did all the time. Oh, I'm going to play Robotech. I expect to play Robotech. I do not expect to play Ravenloft with Mecha. I will be pissed off if you do so. I don't see Shadows laughing. Yes, that's my whole point, is that's what we're getting into. And a lot of us, like I'm looking at L here, why did I do RPGs into video games? Because I did not have the people to play all the RPGs I wanted to at the time. And that's why you had the old SSI and stuff. And then you come back and you're like, I would rather play with real human beings, just like Shadow was talking about with this whole pandemic stuff. I want to talk to human beings. I want to go out. This, as much as we talk about being online, and I know that one D&D is pushing this, I view it just like I would if I was doing a football game and inviting everyone over. We're going to have chips and snacks and different types of food and everything else. And there's that social aspect of even if the game is somewhat of a dud, we had fun. We did stuff. It's a social activity. And I think that's what people are forgetting about all of this while we argue rules and additions. It's a social activity. And what was that famous line of, the one secret is you don't actually need any rules. I have played games with D&D and not rolled a die once while they went through combat because I don't need 10th level characters fighting orcs. You see a band of orcs. Okay, I'll go kill them. All right, this is what happened. I can narrate that. We can move forward because they're not that important to the storyline except that you ran into some orcs. It's very different if, they're first level, but at 10th level, it's trivial. I'm not going to waste my time on dice rolling. Now, if players want a dice roll, that's different.
I think a couple of good points have just been brought up in chat. I'm sure we'll address this one first. We were talking about evolution of games through various editions, and certainly the way games have evolved, this is true. Back in the day, games became video games, RPGs, and certainly at the time I welcomed it. I welcomed the ability to play Baldur's Gate on the PC. I thought that was wonderful. But looking back, he's right in saying that in turn, video games have now influenced new editions of RPGs, in that there's obviously a lot of new players going into the hobby expecting to go in with the video game mindset, and I think that was part of the design philosophy of 4th edition, to appeal to those video gamers, which is what I think one reason why it fell flat with the existing core player base, who probably resented that feel. But yes, it could be its own topic for a stream, but it is something I don't know a great deal about. I
feel it even now. It's just so out there right now, and there's going to come a day where in-person role-playing games are going to be completely forgotten if we're not careful. I'm running a game on Halloween for my son and his 6 friends, probably AD&D, even though they're all 5th edition players. But I want my son and his friends in that generation to carry on this hobby that can't be replaced. No matter how many people online you get, no matter how good the graphics are, nothing beats the look in each other's eyes, the sound of laughter, the slapping each other on the back. All of that is things we maybe take for granted sometimes, but that's what it's really all about.
Shadow, you've got that bit of distortion again that you were getting on Max's stream the other night. Whenever you're speaking, there is something like a grindy noise in the background. You're now muted.
I'm going to go inside. It could be the wind.
Probably is. It probably is.
You know what though?
Yeah, I was just saying the in-person gaming. We're in danger of losing it. That's why I'm holding a game on Halloween for my son and his group of buddies to play some AD&D, even though they're all 5th edition players. But the look in each other's eyes, the sound of laughter, the patting each other on the back, the cheers, none of that's going to be replaced or replaceable by video games, no matter how many people you have online. And it's up to us to keep this hobby alive, or it will go the way of checkers, things like that nobody really plays unless there's nothing else to do, kind of thing. We're all very lucky. We've got this phenomenal hobby that's all about other people and taking your turn at being the hero, so to speak. And it's really up to us to keep it alive.
You know what though? I'm going to bring up the little counterpoint. As much as we talk about video games, I have found that I can find more players nowadays than I could when I was young. It is not as niche of a hobby. As much as we talk about this, it's not as niche of a hobby as it used to be. I can, I go to work. There are 5 or 6 people, and we're not, a couple of archaeologists. We have computer data scientists. We have me as an engineer. We have a lot of people play this. One guy's extra special forces. I can find players where I couldn't find them before, and yet this is despite having online, despite having all of this other stuff out there, because I think some of it is people are getting older and they're like, oh, I want that human connection. So if people have had kids or they don't have kids now, they're like, well, I have money and resources and time because it's hard to connect with other people as you get older. When I was in college, it was really easy to meet friends. They're right there. That's all that we did. As I get older, breaking through to other human beings and finding similar interests where we will actually take time to go do something together is hard. But with role-playing games, we all want to do that. And it is a gateway to meet and to have that human interpersonal connection. Despite the fact that we've had I remember playing EverQuest 20 years ago. EverQuest and all these other, whether it's World of Darkness, WoW, World of Warcraft and all these others, people would still rather play face-to-face together because they want that human interpersonal connection. And I'm not going to say we're going to lose it per se. Well, we're only going to lose it because society doesn't want us getting together. It's not because of anything else.
Don't even get me started on that one, buddy.
I know, but you know where I'm going for that. But it's the same reason, a little personal part of why my parents are talking about going into a retirement home, and I'm telling them no. Because I do not want to have them limited or someone tell me on who I can be with or who I can play with. And it's the same aspect. And yet, in certain areas, you find that they wanted to separate. And so people start going online to do stuff. And it's nice to do that. But, it's, how do I want to put this? It's like finding out it's a well-done steak. It's okay. It's better than nothing. But it's not nearly as good as a medium rare, perfectly cooked steak ribeye. That's what I look at.
That is true. But having said that, I mean, I was slow to get into actually playing games online, and it took a bit of sort of breaking down of the confidence. The first time I ran a game over the internet, it was through Discord, and it was purely for people I already knew. If I'd have started by running a game for people I didn't know, it would have probably been an absolute car crash, because I had to learn how to run a game online. And those first few sessions, we all had to be very tolerant of each other. We had to get used to the idea of how you need to speak when you're just a distant voice in Discord, and how the pace of the game has to change. But right now, I still meet up with my friends on a Monday. Obviously, when one of them doesn't have COVID, as one of them does at the moment, unfortunately. But we, I do. I mean, I've met so many people I'm enjoying gaming with purely through the online sphere as well. And I think even though we're old and we tend to prefer that face-to-face thing, I think online gaming is here to stay. I think it's a great way for people to get into the hobby, as long as they have the confidence to go about doing it. And I think if you are a distended voice, it, it's it's harder for the DM, but I think it's probably easier for the players to join in if you're just a distended voice. But one thing we do lose through gaming with strangers online is that commitment. It's all too easy to try a game and drop out and just ghost everybody and disappear. So that's a problem with playing online. But I have had some of my most enjoyable sessions of DMing playing online games in recent months.
Me too.
Because
Yeah, one of my best times was actually, believe it or not, playing Conan, which is a game I'm not really fond of. I love Conan, but the game itself wasn't what I was hoping for. But I
Right.
enjoyed the hell out of it with people I couldn't see because we were playing on, I think, Discord, but nobody had their faces up or whatever. But you know, it was 4 hours I'm never going to forget. And you're right, we do have the luxury of being able to do this. You know, being able to communicate, you know, over vast distances. I met you, you know, through this very medium, and you know, we could have lived our whole lives never bumping into one another if it wasn't
Exactly.
for this. But we've got to take the good with the bad, and this has been, you know, I'm getting ready to jump off because my son's going to be home. But it's been an incredibly enjoyable conversation with all of you guys. You know, I may have hogged the conversation a few times, but you
Don't
know
worry.
that's one of my many faults. But you know, you're right. This is a tool that lets us, you know, make our lives better. You know, for better or worse. You know, there are downsides to it, but you know, think of all the family members and people you can't see because they're sick or something like that, that we get to use this medium to stay in contact with. So why the heck not use it for gaming? I'm getting ready to run some games pretty soon too, because I live in an area that's literally 200 miles away from my nearest oldest friend, and you know, we're not taking the drive with the gas prices right now, you know. But I can do this, and we can still keep it alive.
And I'm going to say this now. I think I've enjoyed playing and running Call of Cthulhu more online through Discord than I have at the table. I love playing it at the table, but because it just, to me, it feels more atmospheric when there are less distractions
I can
about.
do that. Especially you can force the tone, you know, through lighting and things like that. I've thought about that too. For certain games, this might even be better, and Call of Cthulhu may very well be one of them. You can try to do the old radio, you know, dramas that way through this medium. You can get that old timey feel with a high tech medium.
I don't do any of the technology stuff. I just talk. Don't do any of the
But
technology.
okay, well, you know, you still, you know, you're onto something, and if it works, you know, make it work better. You know, use it to your full advantage, and enjoy the time you have with those people that you want to spend that time with. I applaud you.
Well, cheers. But I think if people, I think part of my point was that if people find gaming online, it's good for gaming as a whole because it'll the ease of getting into the hobby and trying things out that we've got nowadays, because you can just join in an online game for free. You don't need to know anything about the game. You can just join in, try it out for free. And I think it will actually bring more people into face-to-face gaming in the long run.
I actually agree. I agree with you on that aspect. I'm not saying, you know, as much as I said, well, online, but I think the other part is when we're talking about not just this, but the whole reason we role play, or at least why I like to do it, is because I don't necessarily feel limited by the rules. As much as we talk about rules, this is the problem. I say it's a problem, but this is something that I've heard some players talk about is they look at doing things optimally.
Yeah.
And instead of trying to do what would make the game fun or things of that sort, whether we like it or not, we always watch movies. It's like, well, I'm not going in first. Well, I'm not going in. Like, okay, but at a certain point, someone has to push the big red button and see what happens. And I understand. Well, I hate the kinder part, and I've always said this as a player, and I've seen players where they look down and they don't know what to do, and it's better in some cases take the rules and dice away, and say, okay, in this situation, what would you do? And they, by removing all of the mechanical restraints, it allows them to be creative. And then you say, okay, yes, that makes sense. And that's one of the reasons I like certain systems is I don't feel like I'm punishing players because they aren't doing what's optimal within the rule set. I can adjust the difficulty on the fly much easier and stay within the rules. I mean, at a certain point, do you trust your DM enough to know when to throw away the rules? Like in something like D&D, which is very rules heavy, do I trust him enough to throw away the rules and do whatever he wants in that kind of system versus, let's say, a storyteller system where they kind of determine the difficulty on the fly? And you say, okay, well, what do I feel more comfortable with? And I think that's part of it. And I heard, I do listen to stuff online where they talk about Pathfinder. Why I'm no longer playing Pathfinder, because it's always about doing the optimal rolling. I said, well, if you're doing that, you're probably playing the wrong game, because like you said, when the players get at higher levels, then they start figuring out, well, how do I max this? How do I max that? And in some ways, talking about the earlier edition, when I fought a dragon, if you look at basic D&D, I believe it has like 37 hit points. The fight wasn't meant to last more than 4 or 5 rounds. Either all the players were dead or the dragon was dead. And I know that we're all talking about players, but you also have to look at how far did the games actually get. What does it say for like superhero was 7th or 8th level? That was the expectation. So your 5th level character knows that one breath weapon probably will kill him. So now they have to take all this time. By the time they're about 10th or 12th level, they have the spells and equipment. The dragons become relatively trivial. Well, as a DM, I don't enjoy those, but I also don't want to sit there for 40 minutes while they fight because we're just playing, let's whittle down the hit points. Those aren't making a better game with me either. I want it to be tense and action, excited, and we can move forward in the story or game.
One thing I've learned about running games online is, and one thing I like about it is that I, as a DM, feel even less beholden to the rules when I'm running a game online, because there's more emphasis on keeping the game moving than there is in crunching the mechanics. It is so crucial online to keep the game going at a decent pace. You're more willing to throw out any extraneous little rules that you might have dredged up at the table. At the table, you might have pulled your book out and had a quick check or whatever. But online, running a game online, you're so conscious about trying to keep it moving, you don't bother with that. Just make a quick decision. But the players don't necessarily see you making that quick decision, and probably care less about whether it's you're following the rules, because they want the game to move along at a pace as well. That's something I am liking about running Call of Cthulhu online. I strip it down to its absolute basics, and I won't touch any of the chase rules or any of the little fiddly bits that are in the book. I'll just run it at its most basic level, with the passing and failing mechanics on the skill checks and narrating how that happens in the game, and just keep it moving, keep it flowing.
I really like that. I'm gonna need to remember that. They say you learn something new every day. That's what I'm gonna take away, is when I do go to online gaming, to keep it going, to really just keep that flow and keep players engaged and not worry about the trivial nonsense. If it, I can plan ahead. If I need to know a rule for, like you said, a chase, okay, I'll be up on that and we'll go with that. But if it's not happening, let's just keep it moving. I absolutely love that thing I need to remember. Thank you.
And,
No
and what
problem.
was the other aspect too, which is, I knock online because I like physical. I have done online. If you can get a good group in there and everything's moving along just fine. I just the other part is you can self-select. It's not like in the old, if you're playing online, I can play any system I want to if I can find this, just a decent group. If I don't like that group, I leave and go somewhere else. And while we hear all these people on Twitter talking, well, it's this. Did you ever think it's just maybe you that's just being a jerk and you're throwing in all sorts of stuff that no one wants to play with you? It's just like whenever you go outside to play with kids and they all want to accept you, and you're like, well, how come no one wants to play with me anymore? Well, it's probably because you did something and you need to figure out who you were. But you have that opportunity. If I want to play a certain type of game, not that I want to, but if I want to play an X-ray game, I can probably find players that are willing to do it. If I want to play, the Disney gummy bears were all bouncing around, I can probably find that at some point. Yes, I can see Shadow going through it, but you can advertise that, and you will find the players willing to play it.
Eventually.
You can. Well,
That's scary if you think about it too long.
but I mean, you can self-select for all of this stuff by just putting it up. Like, hey, running this game at such and such time, this is what it's going to be like. And players that don't want to play it won't. When it's just your friends, you all have to agree. And you're kind of like, all right, we'll play this game because I'm the odd man out. So, yeah, that's what goes on. And I don't know where, and I know L's coming from an old school aspect. I'm just not accepting that. I'm not finding it. Is by homogenizing all the games. Exactly the opposite. Because now I can find all the different games that are out there that are different. I mean, you're not homogenizing the rules because I can find all the niche games. I can't find players to play Star Frontier. We mentioned that. But if I wanted to get with Elf Fate, I'm sure we can find 5 players, that game probably has barely been played, in the last 40 years. And I think that's what comes out to it is. You're not homogenizing the rules. In fact, you're actually, what I want to say is you're fracturing your play base so much, which is not bad in my view, that I can find a group to play with to play a system I want that is super niche and rare. So anyway,
I mean, you also said earlier, I noticed in the stream that about certainly. I mean, I've never met you, Omanal, apart from talking on here. But you're right in your comment here that we don't feel like strangers after these the various chats we've had, and you can learn a lot from having a chat with someone online about whether you're going to enjoy a game run by them or running a game for them. You can learn a lot about how, and so you are able to select quite easily. You can just jump in a Discord server, have a chat with a few people on there, and you can learn pretty quickly whether you're going to enjoy gaming with them or not. I joined a Discord for something mentioned on the YouTube channel about 9 months ago, and I lurked and I left the Discord channel because all they were talking about was character builds and things like that. And I just thought straight away, I doubt the people in this server are the sort of people I'd like to play a game with. And I was able to just do that. And it was easy to work that out pretty quickly. Yes, you're going to come across some people along the way who aren't all that they seem, but generally, by having these sort of chats, these sort of discussions, we can learn quite a lot about somebody, and we can select quite easily what type of players, which players we have a game with. I think that's great.
I'll bring up one last thing. Is it also gives you the opportunity to test out game systems.
Yes, definitely.
That's the other aspect is you can play with one and say, well, it fell flat. And I really do believe a lot of times, and this is true, you have to play a game a few times to really see whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
But you
Maybe.
know, well, I mean, unless it's really, really bad. I mean, but that's what I'm trying to say is a lot of times, because there are nuances and rules and depends on the DM, and there's other aspects in there. That's what I'm saying is that you want to play a few different games with different people to see whether you like it or not. To see whether you like now certain mechanics just bug the hell out of me. Cypher, I don't think is a bad system. I don't. It's just doesn't ring to me for a lot of stuff. But if you are a person that likes the D20 system, I kind of like it in some ways better than the regular D20 for what it has. But it can also get really weird and crunchy, and it requires but it allows things to be very quickly. I can run a Cypher game with barely any prep to just get stuff going through for monsters. Oh, hand me a module. Okay. I can probably change that module up in about 10 minutes and get everything I need out of it. And you probably wouldn't notice the difference except it's using the Cypher system, the burst D&D for any module. I can't do that with going from 1E to 5E. It's much. That's what I'm trying to say. So certain flexibilities and systems have that. But I as I get older, I'm beginning to realize I don't like the D20 system as much. I like non-linear aspects to games. And I don't like 20s are automatic critical hits. 1s are automatic, critical fumbles or things of that sort. But
These are things you learn over time, though, aren't they? They learn. Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm going to have to say it is at that time. It's 10 past midnight here, and I've got work in the morning. So I am going to bring the stream to an end very, very shortly. So before we go, I do want to thank everybody who's been on the stream tonight. Elfbait has been his usual interesting self. Always got some good points to make. We've had DK on here. We've had Connell on here. And I do want to also allow people, I know Max does this and I want to start doing this. Everyone who's been in chat, I want to give people an opportunity to shill for their own YouTube channel, because we need all the clicks we can get. But the first person I am going to mention in terms of YouTube channels, and I've shouted him out many, many times before, is Old Mage's Musings. If you haven't checked out his channel, it's very amusing. You've got Melinster Gandalore, the lovable old wizard, and you've got Ace-Eric, who is his counterpart. Elfbait, you're always interesting. You're always interesting. I love having you on my channel.
Nice meeting you, man.
What's this? Grow up, you old geek, and retire.
Retirement's awesome.
I've got 20 years before I can retire. And in Britain at the moment, I can't get a pension until probably now until I'm about 70. But anyhow, so check out Mage's Musings channel. Always good to no problem, Mage's Musings, and make sure you get Ace-Eric, up there for more of the evil party, because they're very entertaining. Thank you, Elle, for keeping chat feisty tonight. I should say. Elle has certainly been controversial in chat tonight, keeping people going. The banter between him and Elfbait was made for amusing reading. I know Elfbait doesn't have a channel I can shill anymore. Unless you want to bring that channel back, Elfbait, I'll watch your old videos. Other DM James has popped in. He's got a channel. I know Omanel doesn't have his own channel. The reason for that is his videos would be far too long because he'd never shut up.
Well, on there.
Graham doesn't have a channel. And I know Shadow's waiting to shill his channel. I'm going to let you shill your channel in a moment. I'm just scrolling back on chat to see if there's anybody else I know of who's got a channel. Connell does have his channel. So
He's on my channel all the damn time. Well, he's my little brother, so not really, but you know what I mean. He's my adopted little brother.
Shadow, give yourself a shill.
Well, you know, we're a father and son channel. We try to keep it nice and wholesome, and you know, talk about all kinds of things, gaming and sometimes not gaming. We did a car show. We do other things. Appreciate that. It was a lot of fun. We're gonna maybe do some more. We had a lot of fun, but you know, that's what it's all about. You know, life is too short, and you know, I'm trying to share my father and son experience with those gamers out there to show how easy it is to get your kids involved in this. There, you know, whether it's a board game, a role-playing game, whatever, treasure these moments. And you know, if you got some spare moments, come on down to Shadow and Son. You know, we'll make you feel right at home. We've always got something on, just about a video every day. And you know, I really had a great time hanging out with you, all you guys. And I will be subbing to all those people that you shouted out. You know, I spend most of my days watching guys like you. And you know,
that's you're retired, aren't you? You can do that.
Yeah. I should do other stuff, but you know, it's my version of the radio now. You know, and like I said, it was a pleasure hanging out with you guys. I hope I get to hang out with you guys again sometime soon. Omen, you know, I'll see you every other time I'm on, if not every time I'm on. And I love talking to Omen. He really should have a channel. I'm telling you guys. Then I could go and spend some of my StreamYard hours over there with him, you know. But, you know, one of these days he'll get around to it, maybe not. If not, he's going to be a permanent fixture on my channel. Always welcome. As are any of you guys, if you see me doing a sci-fi chat or some other weird chat that I'm doing, you guys are always welcome. As long as I got a slot open, I'll make room for you guys. So thank you for having me on. And, you know, I hope everybody has a great day.
Cheers, thank you. And yeah, I think I probably should put links in, but I'm going to have to do it in the morning, or maybe when I get home from work tomorrow, because I've got to be up in 7 hours from now. So I'm not going to sit and do the links and stuff right away. I'll do it tomorrow. Owen, I'll comment it. We need more puppets. Yes.
All I can think of is, you know, being John Malkovich, where he's playing with the puppets. Anyway, we're just waiting for Major's Musings to do that, along with, you know, the Dark Crystal. That's what I'm waiting for Major's Musings to get up to, is being able to do the Dark Crystal.
Yeah, and I got to go over there and sub as soon as possible, so I don't forget, because I'm old.
It's Merlin's de Gandalore is a character, and Ace-Eric is so wonderfully deliciously evil. It's light-hearted fun, and that's what it should be. Anyhow,
we need more of that.
Thank you all for coming on for the chat. Once again, I'm going to end the broadcast in 3, 2, 1. See ya.